Mizoram University, hosted here today at Mizoram University. So therefore, our most honorable Vice Chancellor, K.R.S. Sambasivarao, would like to welcome you all. And as he comes in, let me tell you a little bit about him, that since he joined us in 2017, we have developed in leaps and bounds. And our academic fraternity and the people of Mizoram are extremely grateful to him for his contributions in our education and developments. Earlier, as a professor of zoology and biotechnology at Acharya Nagar Juna University, Guntur, he held several key academic positions, including Vice Chancellor in charge, Pro-Vice Chancellor. As a learner, Professor Rao has several notable degrees in several universities in the country, a Doctor of Science in Biotechnology, PhD in Zoology, PhD in Pharmaceutical Science, MSc Zoology, MSc Information Technology. Professor Rao published over 250 research papers, which are well cited in various national and international journals. He has successfully filed 8 patents and edited and authored 20 books. Internationally, Professor Rao worked as a visiting scientist at Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta, USA, at University of Göttingen, Germany, Virginia Commonwealth University Medical College in Richmond in the USA, and he has also worked as adjunct professor at INDICASAD, with which we have a lot of connections even now in the Republic of Panama. He is well-traveled academically in Australia as well as in Asia, South Asia. He has guided 25 PhD students, 20 MPhil students, and he has received many awards, including Panama National Award for Educational Development. I proudly present to you our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasivarao, to give the welcome address, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected the President of the AIU, Professor Tiruvasagam, Vice Chancellor of MIT University, Chennai, and the Professor Vineshil Gautam, the Founder Director of IIM Kozhikode, and Dr. Amrendra Pani from AIU, and other invited speakers, and who are going to join, Professor Pankaj Mittalji and Professor Shailendra Raj Mehta, Professor Anil Shashtrabudriji, and Professor Ganta Ramesh, and other invited dignitaries. It was a great pleasure for us, Mizoram University, to organize this event, which is a very important topic of present requirement, present day need, and governance in higher education, and with an emphasis on that is a Third World Higher Education Conference, which is going to held in May 2022, which is a wonderful event going to be organized to discuss on various issues relating to the quality education in the world. The Third World Higher Education Conference will bring together many stakeholders in the education system, and they prepare a roadmap for next few years, the next era of higher education. This roadmap will respond to the challenges faced by humanity and planet and whole globe, and with a special attention to the global disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic during the last 1.5 years to 2 years, and how the universities and education institutions are suffering during this particular pandemic period, and how it is going to be shift over from not traditional education to digital education, and how digital education is going to make a impact on the quality of education, because the quality of education is very important to be discussed how it is going to, because many students and many parents, and even including teachers of the university and colleges, they have a feeling that the quality of education is not that much been relevant and also appropriate for the students and children. And this particular aspect has to be discussed in the particular the World Educational Summit, which is going to be organized in May 2022, the World Higher Education Conference, which is also now this particular the webinar on governance in higher education is making an emphasis on this particular discussion. And it was a wonderful idea of organizing this and inviting many eminent speakers who are actually the important people in the education system of our country. The UNESCO's, the United Nations SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG 4 actually, which has been emphasized on quality education. It also says that the Sustainable Development Goals should have, it ensure that inclusive and equitable quality education to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all the people in the world. And it also ensures that gender equality and empower all women and girls, education, appropriate education and everything. It ensures also availability of sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Like this, there are many objectives which need to be fulfilled along with the quality education. And this is going to be uh, very important, particularly during the situation of this pandemic, changing economies and changing social economic conditions of the people. This is going to play a crucial role, particularly the online education is going to play a very important role. And this need to be discussed, and eminent people who are actually invited to this webinar, they are going to discuss on these particular aspects and also approach of the quality education, how it is to be protected, and how children has to be provided a quality education during this particular pandemic time. And it was Mizoram University also taking the situation an advantage, that is an advantage of this pandemic situation. And we have one of the very few universities in the country have been shifted into digital education immediately within 15 days. We have started conducting classes through online, and we have completed all these 2 years, academic years, very successfully. The instruction through online, and material provided to the children online, and examinations were conducted online, and the admissions were also conducted online. And unfortunately, even the many parts of the country actually has been recovered very well from the COVID situation. But we are still suffering, Mizoram particularly, we are still suffering with large positive cases in Mizoram. In the past 6 months, we are in lockdown. And even today also, cases are increasing day by day. And the positivity is also very high when compared with other states in Northeast, and also after Kerala, it is going to be alarming in whole country. And even then, we did not stop our academic activity in Mizoram University. And we are continuing our education to children regularly, the classes through online and all other media components we are utilizing, social media, we even using TV and using even the Facebook and also YouTube, and we are providing information to the children. And we are the one university who have conducted more than 500 webinars in the last 1.5 years. And we have invited more than 250 foreign speakers to our university webinars. And every day we are almost in the last 1.5 years, every day one webinar we have conducted in different subjects. And all those webinars, lectures, even from the foreign speakers, we have uploaded to our Facebook and YouTube, and students are able to utilize that particular material whenever it is required. And all the using the learning management system, we have provided the material for all the classes regularly through the learning management system cloud. We have given the opportunity for the prepared material from the teachers, and it was uploaded to the LMS system, and the students are able to utilize that. And we have conducted examinations, including UG examinations at different places. All colleges were conducted digitalized education. But we never feel that it is the best education we provide, because particularly in science and engineering subjects, we have still some problems because we are not able to provide them practical component in an efficient manner. But a few months actually we opened the university for final year students, and we allowed them to do classes here, practical classes. And we have gone to an extent of providing them virtual mode of practical demonstration, but it is not really satisfactory for us. But for practicals, actually, we are not practical component and engineering and science education, we are not really able to do justification for the children. But maximum extent possible, we are providing them satisfactory education during the digital era, particularly during this COVID time. And we have also started more than 20-25 skill development online courses in the last 1 year to 1.5 years. Several diplomas, several skill development programs, and MBA program, MCOM program, and BBA and BCom programs, online education we have provided. We started because we are one of the few universities identified for that particular education, because being in the 100 ranks below, that's what actually we have been allowed to go for our education. And it was very pertinent to inform that we have completed everything in time, and we are trying to do everything for just that. But actually, even implementation of NEP, we have constituted different committees, and syllabus modification is on the way. And we are also implementing new educational policy immediately at the instance. And we are also helping that colleges to have syllabus modification at the graduation level and also PG level. And we are multi-entry and multi-exit system, and academic bank of credits also we have implemented, and we are implementing that all component. We have prepared our roadmap of our Mizoram University NEP implementation, and it is going to be circulated to all the members very soon for its utility. So we are trying to trying our best to maintain the quality education during this pandemic time, and we are utilizing the digital components and everything. And with this, I just wanted to take permission to all that, because it is only just a welcome address, I know, but I just mentioned because the dignitaries who are here should know about Mizoram, how it is being located in a northeast remote area, how Mizoram University is able to do all this. And this is the first university, one among the many universities which has converted immediately into a digital system and online system. And we are the first people to complete our academic year, and admissions, and even 2021 admissions we have completed, and first semester examinations are going to be conducted now. So being located in a very remote area also, we are able to do all these things with a very commitment and dedication of our faculty and non-teaching staff and students and other stakeholders. And we are trying our best to provide the quality education. So I welcome all of you again once, and the eminent speakers from different places, and President of AAU and Secretary General of AAU, and Chairman AICT, and other dignitaries, the former Director of IIM Kozhikode, Sri Gautamji, and other invited speakers to our webinar. And we are very eager to listen to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, in Mizoram University, we take on our challenges, I think, quite well. I would just like to announce that Professor Ramesh Ganta and Professor Anil Sahasrabuddhe have also joined us. And it is very, very good to see Dr. Usha and the team here. And I would also like
Namaskar, sir. Sashwati sir, namaskar.
Namaskar, Sambasiva Rao ji. Namaskar.
Namaste sir. Namaste sir.
Namaskar, Sahasraputri ji, Vinashil Gautam here.
Yeah, Namaskar, Namaskar.
Namaskar, Chairman sir, Colonel Ji Tiruvasagam sir. Namaskar sir.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Professor Mehta will be joining us a little bit late as his board meeting was held up.
Professor Denny, let me just intervene a little bit. I got a message from Professor Mehta.
Yes.
Actually, we have to admit him in the panel. Probably he's trying to join. Can you ask the technical team to support him?
As he is also there. Suraj, actually, Professor Mehta is
Suraj
trying
will
to
do that. Yeah.
Please admit him. No, he is trying to join. There is some problem with Professor Mehta.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. He will do it, sir.
Okay. It will be done, sir. Okay. Now, as I had mentioned before this, the seminar was brought to us by the Association of Indian Universities on the request of the UNESCO, and an introductory note, therefore, about this webinar would be most appropriate from the AIU. We thought Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal would be here with us, but in her place, Dr. Amarendra Pani, who is the Joint Director and Director in charge of research at AIU, will be doing the introductory note. Dr. Amarendra Pani, please.
Thank you, Professor Dini. Good afternoon, everybody. Professor G. Tiruvasagam, sir, Honorable President of Association of Indian Universities. Madam Dr. Pankaj Mittal, in absentia, I acknowledge her presence in absentia. Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, esteemed Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University. Professor Vinashil Gautam, former and founding director of IIM Kozhikode, one of the institution builders. Professor Anil Sahasraputri, sir, the esteemed chairman of All India Council for Technical Education. Professor Ramesh Ganta Sahab, a veteran in the subject of education. Professor J.K. Patnaik, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University. Professor S.K. Laldin Pui Pente, the coordinator from the Mizoram University for this event. Invited guests, faculty members, and delegates of this consultative meet. In fact, I am just trying to put a proxy on behalf of Dr. Mittal, who was scheduled to present the introductory remarks and background note of this conference and this consultative meet. In fact, for the sake of brevity and to making it shorter, just let me focus on the business directly. In fact, in the month of March 2020, Association of Indian University received an invitation from the UNESCO, United Nations Educational Scientific Cultural Organization, and they informed us that UNESCO is planning to hold the third higher education conference, that is abbreviated as WHEC, WHEC 2021, and the theme was assigned the reinventing the role and place of higher learning for sustainable future, and that was scheduled in between October 7 to 9, 2021 at Barcelona, Spain. But as you know, the entire world is reeling under tremendous pressure because of this unprecedented onslaught of COVID-19 that has really disturbed the life cycle and everything in the world, on the planet. So this conference particularly has also been announced to be postponed, and somewhere in the mid of 2022, it has been scheduled once again, but the dates are yet to come. However, while getting the invitation from the UNESCO, in fact, UNESCO wanted that India and Indian universities should actively participate in the third higher education conference, and they should also contribute to the knowledge development and dissemination. As all of you know, that today we all are concerned about the sustainable development goals in everything, and in the process, higher education as the economic engine of the system is looked towards helping and supporting to accelerate the process and support the sustainable development goals objectives accomplishment. So in this process, they had forwarded a document to us having 10 themes on different aspects of higher education. The first theme was impact of COVID-19 on higher education. Then the second was higher education and the sustainable development goals. Third was inclusivity in higher education. Fourth was quality and relevance of programs. Then the academic mobility in higher education. Then higher education governance, financing in higher education, data and knowledge production, international cooperation to enhance synergies. And the last one was preparing for the future of higher learning. These were the 10 themes assigned to AIU. And when Dr. Mittal marked this document to me, she asked me in a meeting how should we approach this issue and how to help the World Education Conference organized by UNESCO. I proposed to Madam, let us organize 10 consultative meets, means 10 webinars on different themes as assigned by the UNESCO. Then for AIU being a small organization having the small logistics and small manpower, we thought it will be appropriate. One reason was that AIU is a small organization having small infrastructure, so it will be better in the interest of the higher education community to organize these programs in collaboration with the different member universities. That was the first idea. Second idea was also involving the member universities in the process so that the dissemination of the knowledge can be widespread and it can have a wider mandate for the purpose. So on the basis of these two objectives, I proposed Dr. Mittal that let us assign this to our partner universities, 10 potential universities, and we will collect reports from them. All the reports we will be tightly editing here and we will convert it into a country paper, and this country paper will be submitted to UNESCO as the position paper of India on various themes. That was the background. So in the March, we received the invitation. In the month of April, after this decision was taken, we identified 10 universities, and thanks to all the Honorable Vice Chancellor of all the 10 universities to whomsoever we approached, they agreed, they acceded to our request, and they supported us with the execution of these events. And ladies and gentlemen, let me inform you that already 4 programs, 4 consultative meets on different aspects like internationalization, cooperation and enhancing synergies, and inclusivity in higher education, and quality and relevance of programs have already been conducted in the Dalbagh Educational Institute, Sri Sri University, Cuttack, and the internationalization was conducted by Savitribai Phule University, Pune. And one of the important theme was dealt by Shastra University, that was the data and knowledge production, which is one of the very, very significant sub-theme running up to the main theme. So 4th have already gone, and we have stepped into the 5th consultative meeting in the series. And with this small background, we are expecting a very good report, a quality report. Time and again, I have been coordinating with all our respected coordinators that the basic purpose of the consultative meet is to draw a consolidated report with its good features, and that will help us to develop, convert it into a country paper, which will be submitted to UNESCO. So in any way, this is going to be an international document. So therefore, repeatedly, I have been requesting to all our coordinators to maintain the quality and rigor of the process. Therefore, this meeting is not just a seminar, it's not a conference, it's not a workshop, it's just a focused meeting of the senior people, and we are expecting some insight, some good scintillating points to be included in the report. With this small background, and once again, joining Professor K.R. Sambasib Rao, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, in extending a warm welcome to all our speakers and invited guests, faculty members, and who are participating in this consultative meet. We welcome to all of you on behalf of our partnering organization, Mizoram University, and on behalf of my own organization, Association of Indian Universities, and on behalf of my own President and own Secretary General. From all behalf, we are extending you a warm welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pani, sir, for the very informatory introductory note on the purpose of this meeting. Moving on, it is a privilege to introduce before his address the current president of the Venerable Association of Indian Universities, Colonel Dr. G. Thiruvasadam, who is also the Vice Chancellor of Amit University, Chennai, and a person of academic and administrative eminence. He was among the pioneers to bring together Vice Chancellors of various universities in order to jointly and severally pool resources and initiate interdisciplinary programs for the betterment of the student community. Dr. Thiruvasagam has had a dynamic experience of 5 decades of higher education with a career spanning 34 years as Professor of Commerce and Management and 10 years as Principal at Yadava College, Madurai, and a stint as a member of the Syndicate of Madurai Kamaraj University that culminated in his being appointed as Vice Chancellor for 2 successive terms at Bharatiya University, Coimbatore, and University of Madras. Apart from authoring 21 books, he also has 36 publications in national and international journals, which have had considerable impact among academicians and research scholars. He has also served as a member in various committees of prestigious apex bodies of higher education and was one of the 6 Vice Chancellors of India invited to serve on the Central Advisory Board of Education under the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Colonel Thiruvasagam has also sought to establish ties with universities in almost all the major countries of the world, like USA, UK, Germany, France, and many, many more, and was instrumental in setting up a formal structure and office for international relations in all the universities with which he was associated. He is also a recipient of the National Award for Exemplary Service to the Community from the then President of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and also the Service Above Self Award from the Rotary International. He was also awarded the Colombo Plan Fellowship by the British Council in 1992. With this excerpt of his numerous achievements, may I now invite Colonel Dr. Thiruvasagam to deliver the President's address. Over to you, sir.
Sir, you have to unmute.
Thank you very much for your flattering introduction. I don't know how far I am deserving. Honorable Dr. Sambasiva Rao, the Vice Chancellor of esteemed Mizoram University. Honorable Professor Anil Sastra-Pude, the Chairman, AICTE. Most respected Kaudamji, the former Director of IAM. My colleague in AAU, Dr. Amendra Bani, the Joint Director of Association of Indian Universities. Beloved and respected Dr. Pankaj Mittal in their absentia, and respected officials of the Mizoram universities, and the most respected and revered resource persons who are going to contribute in this major event. Pranam, Namaskar, Vanakkam, and good afternoon to every one of you. Indeed, I take it as a privilege and honor given to me to be a part of this webinar, which is being organized on the invitation of UNESCO and as per the program launched by AAU as well. I should register my sincere thanks to Professor Sambasiva Rao and his team for hosting this program and organize this webinar in a colorful, purposeful, of course, useful way as well. Our friends, the title of this conference is, of course, Governance in Higher Education Institutions. I would like to put before you this title as far as Indian context is concerned. Though we are going to submit our recommendation to UNESCO, hopefully UNESCO may expect what's the governance pattern in India, how far that pattern is being advocated or yet to be improved. This may be the expectation of the UNESCO convention as well. Keeping in mind, I would like to give my own remarks. Before that, I am confident that the deliberations of the conference and its recommendations to UNESCO would be of purposeful and useful also. My dear friends, when we think about governance in higher education institutions, with special reference to India, predominant importance is to be given on various aspects like organization structure of the institutions, selection and appointment of leaders. What I mean, the vice chancellors and the directors, composition of statutory authorities, that is syndicate or board of management and sometimes academic council and the senate, empowering those bodies, participation of the stakeholders of the institution, and most importantly, autonomy of the institution, role of the AVEX bodies like UGC, AICT, and its regulations, etc. So governance, I don't mean mere, it tells about the leader of the organization, the so-called vice chancellor and the directors. It involves all the other authorities and statutory bodies as well. Friends, fortunately, the National Education Policy 2020 has also given much importance for the governance of higher education of institutions of India. All higher education institutions in India will aim to become independent, self-governing institutions pursuing innovation and excellence. Moreover, measures will be taken at all higher education institutions to ensure leadership of the highest quality and to promote an institutional culture of excellence. Likewise, a board of governors shall be established, consist of a group of highly qualified, competent, and dedicated individuals having proven capabilities and a strong sense of commitment to the institutions. Further, the National Education document says the board of governance of an institution will be empowered to govern the institution free of any external interference, make all appointments, including that of head of the institution, and take all decisions regarding governance. It runs further. There shall be overreaching legislation that will supersede any contravening provisions of other earlier legislation and would provide for constitution, appointment, modalities of functioning, rules and regulations, and the roles and responsibilities of the Board of Governance. Fellow participants, I would like to touch upon a few areas which require close attention with a priority to make governance of the higher education institution of India very effective and successful. They are selection or nomination of the members to a statutory body like syndicate, senate, and academic council, and the private and deemed university they called as board of management, including vice chancellors or directors. Yes. Now, as stressed in the National Education Policy report, the selection of the leader, the so-called vice chancellor and director, should be of very meritorious and should be of transparent, and the person of eminence, both academic administration alone should be appointed. When it's the case, the present requirement of to make the eligibility of appointing vice chancellor should be redesigned or restructured. Basically, it is my personal feeling out of my experience as the 16 years of vice chancellor. Mere seeking the background of the candidate whose contribution of research or his involvement in project funding and all cannot be considered he has the quality and potentiality of leading an organization with the dynamic leadership. Definitely, the organization or the committees who are going to decide about the selection of the vice chancellor or director should see that the candidate should have the equal background, capacity, capability of both leadership and research, of course, academic qualities as well. We come to know most of the committees, they feel only the research output or research contribution alone can be taken into consideration that will lead to a person after occupying the position without the knowledge of dynamism and personality skills. The most of the places we come across failures. So equal importance should be given, and no additional or further influence from outside or political, our government should be there in selection of the leaders of the higher education institution. That is required in governance. If it is there is failure at the time of selection, definitely whatever you have in the governance will not bring any success to the organization and to the higher education of any institution is concerned. That is number one. And number two, not only the position of the Vice Chancellor. Vice Chancellor cannot take any decision without getting concurrence from the statutory body like Syndicate, Senate, and Academic Council. So the constitution of those bodies also should be very well structured, which should be very well represented, and the people who are being nominated by certain state, by governors of the particular state, certain state, by the government, they are nominating people purely mostly on political affiliation. When those people are coming and occupying a position in the syndicate, and most of the syndicate, maximum number of people are from the government and government nominee, the academic participation from the colleges and from the university departments are comparatively less. Because of the higher strength of representation from government and representation of governor office, and of course, sometimes they are being misled due to the political affiliation or ruling government affiliation that indirectly affect the governance of the any institution or any higher education body as well. It is the same case with the Academic Council, it is the same case with the Senate also. So much attention should be given, as specifically mentioned in the report, there should be any outside influence as far as selection and nomination of these leaders in the bodies, concerned bodies. And then one more, even after getting appointed leaders, the Vice Chancellors or the directors of the private universities, we cannot come to a conclusion that these leaders are already well acquainted with, well associated with university practices, university rules and regulations, university statutes, etc., etc. Some of them might have served as a syndicate members, some of them might have served in various capacities in organization. They may have the experience. The people who don't have any experience with the administration of the university cannot easily take off the administration, for which what I suggest, there must be adequate training and orientation to the newly appointed Vice Chancellors. AAU also has in mind to organize such a training program to the Vice Chancellors, Registrar, Pro-Vice Chancellors, even Pro-Chancellors, even Chancellor also, because they are going to be the major people playing a big role as far as running the universities in a successful way. So that is also another major component required to make the governance very effective. And one more thing as well. India, we have almost 1,100 universities. The duration and tenure of Vice Chancellor varies from one state to another. There are some universities, mostly in the northern part of India, the tenure is 5 years. And when you come down to south, the tenure is 3 years. The Vice Chancellors who have been given 3 years, definitely they cannot plan, they cannot implement, they cannot come out with the university by fulfilling his mission and vision as well. So it is better all the Vice Chancellors of universities should be given 5 years tenure, then only he can very well understand the university and its background and its statute, and study the particular environment, plan on the basis of the environment available, and plan for the effective success of the program, and complete it by giving very good grade, by arranging very good grading from NAC, NBA, and getting appreciation from UGC and AICTE. So uniform tenure should be there for the Vice Chancellors and Director. That is also one more thing required for governance. And the second major thing is funding to the universities. Whatever leadership we have, whatever we are good in organization structure, without adequate funding, no university can be successful in the governance. Unfortunately, even many state universities, even today, they are suffering. They find it difficult, disbursement of salary, disbursement of pension benefit to the retired faculty. When it's the case, how can the leader of the university can find time, spare time to look after the administration and to look after the programs and project of research and academic? So the government must come forward without seeing any difference between private university and public universities. They have to give grant in aid on the basis of the number of years of existence and on the basis of the performance or on the basis of the contribution what they make. So funding should be made available. As I know, there are some state universities, they have not been given even a one rupee as the fund from state government. It's the same case with the central government also. It should not be the case unless you ensure funding. Fortunately, the new education policy has given a provision for creating national research funding. That is a welcoming future as well. Even on that, there must be equal importance both for the private university and public universities. Nowadays, private universities not far behind the public universities as far as their contribution towards research, funding, patent, etc. sometimes excel than the public universities. When they do this much, they also deserve to get the funding, and at the same time, they can be given equal importance in allocating funding from funding agencies also. So that level of funding should be given, then only the leader of the university can run the program with a peaceful mind. Again, self-sustainability of funding is most important. Fortunately or unfortunately, depends upon how people view. The UGC, of course, AICT also taken a decision not to give opportunity to all the universities to run the distance education program and online program as well. You know pretty well, the most of the universities in India, they fully depended upon the resources from distance education and online program. Now, the regulation stated that only the category A university, category 1 university alone is permitted to offer such programs. Out of this stringent rule, regulation made most of the universities suffer even for disbursement of salary. This kind of disparity should not be there. One side, we are quoting many examples of Western countries. One side, we incorporated many programs of developed countries, the national education policy also. Another side, you are discouraging, you are curbing the future and development of the institutions by putting lot of regulations, including not allowing the institution to offer distance education, because education should be spread anywhere at any time. That kind of independent freedom should be given to all the universities, unless and otherwise. Most of the universities will not function, will not organize anything, will not go for any accreditation, will not go for any grading. That is going to be the case. I can quote an example. Not more than 50% of the colleges and universities not gone for NAC, all because of the constraint, including funding and the support from the government. These are all the major things we need as far as the governance of the Indian higher education is concerned. I can go back to the UGC and conclude my remarks. It goes back in the history of formulation of UGC Act of 1956. Debate carried out within the parliament at the time of formation of the UGC is apprised. It suggests that the political leadership was successful in bringing a closure to the debate by addressing the concerns raised regarding autonomy of the states and the universities by the state leaders and vice chancellors in a satisfactory manner. But there were important promises made by the center, they mean government, while choosing the debate on joint planning, national purpose, and university design. These promises remained unfulfilled. Seemingly, academic and state level leadership did not also pursue this promise consistently. These are all the observations made by UGC itself. Even after several decades, almost 7 decades, most of things not happened as planned by UGC even otherwise. My dear friends, all the universities, I can very openly tell as the president of Asuna India Universities, we don't have autonomy. We have not been given autonomy. Mere namesake, our regulatory bodies are telling universities are autonomous. No, as university, I cannot design a program. As university, I cannot introduce an innovative program. As university, I cannot go for tie-up with the foreign universities. When it is a case, how the autonomy is working, how the innovation is going to happen, how the national education policy is going to be successful, that is going to be a very big question mark. If anyone wants to see the governance of higher education institution is going to be as par with developed countries like USA, UK, even China and Japan, you have to keep in mind whatever remarks I have mentioned. So with these few words of my observation, thank you very much for the opportunity given to me. Wish the program every success. Thank you very much indeed.
Madam, your audio is muted.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, the President Association of Indian Universities, for a most meaningful, brave, inspiring, and relevant address. Thank you so much, sir. We have with us today most eminent speakers of our country, not only our country, internationally, I must say, most learned and experienced persons, especially in the area of higher education. As we go on with the program, we do not have very many ground rules. Let me just mention that questions and comments are most welcome from the participants, the many young students and research scholars and faculty members that are participating here. Your comments and your questions may be posted in the Q&A or chat box. Although they may not be addressed immediately, they will be very important to get our thinking going, swirling new vision in the course of reinventing what higher education will mean in the future. In this webinar, we will be looking specifically at governance in higher education. And so without further ado, may we have the first speaker, Dr. Vinay Gautam, introduce, please. GP.
Thank you. So our first speaker for the afternoon is Dr. Vinay Gautam, who is a legend in the field of education in general and management education in particular. He is a rare professional with an on-hand experience of building learning setups in the engineering education institutions, IITs, management education institutions, IIMs, and general university systems. His recognitions are several, including Fellowship of the Royal Asiatic Society, London, Association of Business Executives, UK, Art Do International, Manila, and awards, and numerous other recognitions from various national and international bodies. He has been associated with UGC, AICTE, and various other organizations at various policymaking and operational levels. He has also been in some key government committees of Ministry of Personnel and Administrative Reforms, Human Resources Development, Rural Development, Science and Technology, Agriculture, Shipping, and others. Widely published and traveled, he has lectured from Montreal to Melbourne and Caracas to Tokyo. He is a past president of Art Do International and director designate of International Federation of Training and Development Organizations. He has represented India in UNESCO-related activities, Asian Productivity Organizations, Economic Forum in Morocco, and others. And his forte is the ability to blend Oriental and Occidental trends in education and learning. He also contributes to the policy and operational dimensions. May I now call upon the very proficient Dr. Vinay Gautam to deliver his talk on governance in higher education and overview. Sir, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Professor Thiruvasagam, Dr. Pankaj Mittal, whom I'm hoping will be able to join at some stage, Dr. Rao, Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, Professor Sahasra Buddhi and other eminent speakers, Professor Fente, and the remaining 70 plus colleagues, young professionals who have found time to be a part of this deliberations. Yes, as has been mentioned in my introduction, I have been a part of similar or comparable UNESCO consultancy exercises, dialogues earlier on, most notably the place of engineering education in management institutions for a regional seminar of UNESCO, or some work which UNESCO commissioned on inner learning, which Professor Dr. Karan Singh led, or later on something on product development. The list is large. It's always a good thing to get back to UNESCO's efforts because it is the only existing forum to create a common platform of dialogue on educational issues. After the erudite presentation of Professor Thiruvasagam, I could have taken my prepared speech and put it on the side because between him and me, we cover all that is worth learning because he knows everything and I know nothing. So after his presentation, I was trying to figure out what's left for me to say, and I will focus on that because there is nothing more generous than standing on the shoulders of giants and say, yeah, Professor Thiruvasagam said it, now what more do you want me to add to it? So having said that, my first proposition is that we must recognize we are looking at a particular stream of learning. And I'm glad the emphasis is on learning and we are moving away from education per se, as it were, which is essentially been studied and restudied in multiple situations. I come from a tradition and have been to universities which even resisted a PhD registration unless you knew a classical language, which was an opportunity for me to brush shoulders with knowledgeable scholars, say, of Sanskrit or Latin. And the current educational system which prevails across the world and what is what we are talking about is said to have come into existence around the 15th, 16th century, where the first stage of development was Universitas Literarum. Universities are a place for literary pursuits. In the interest of time and the theme of the conference, it may not be possible to discuss all the stages of evolution this educational stream has gone through, but basically it meant universities are a place to pursue literary interests and to push the borders of literary knowledge. The second stage came with the imperial role of European nations and universities there, which is essentially where they started. It became Universitas Magistrorum. Universities are there to create a magistrorum cadre for running the empire. They are meant to enable administration. And the third stage came with the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, which is now converting itself into the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Universitas Alumnorum. Universities are for its students. So when you come to an institution, you are looking for job opportunities. I have no time, as I said, to get into the details of the merits of this classification, but I think this consultation is poised at an important stage because we are essentially asking what will be the next stage of evolution of our learning systems. And this consultation may well contribute to UNESCO's thinking of labeling that stage. And clearly it is learning and it is not just employment, which is what talking of alumnorum would also involve. So I think this discussion is seminal in laying the future directions of growth of higher education and the way it should be contributing. And if you look at the note for the seminar, it has got a very wide span of elaboration, and I will not read from that note because that will take time, and the assumption is people who have come to the webinars presumably know what the webinar is envisaged for. So I will focus on what I think is the important part of my delivery. Namely, you have to understand what is the context of governance, what is the range of the domain in which governance would operate. And we are not talking just of India. We are talking of implications which would be global in character, because this is not something which is meant to be an effort on the reforms of the Indian university system, which I think is a very important characteristic of any discussion. But if I refer to Indian experience, it is only because of 2 reasons. First, the diversity of India is such, from the tribal method of learning to the most advanced method of learning, covering in itself a spectrum of technologies which facilitate learning, and therefore it may have some relevance for universal applicability. My second submission is levels of learning and education and intervention in India are very large. And having been a member of selection committee of different types of universities at the highest level, from the vice chancellor to the pro-vice chancellor, one thing which I have found is a very limited supply of really capable people who understand the level of universities which they will be expected to administer. For example, when I served on the committee for the selection of a university in Arunachal Pradesh, of the 21 candidates we interviewed, not more than 3 of them had any understanding which would help them to lead the educational experience of a state, though small, a unique state of Arunachal Pradesh, and therefore how should curriculum be designed, how should teaching methodologies be designed, how should interventions take place in linkages with the outside world, and what was valid there would be valid, say, in Africa, Latin America, and I dare say in United Kingdom, Germany, or France, you name it. Many of us who have exposure at an international level of intimate dealing with universities, you will recall how a few decades ago, at one stroke of legislation, hundreds of polytechnics in United Kingdom were converted into universities almost at the drop of a leaf. And the brand of an imperial stamp was so large that they made good business wherever they went in the developing countries. So I don't want to dwell on that, but I would want UNESCO thinking on this to recognize that there are country realities, there are regional realities, there are local realities. And when you talk of governance, you cannot have a universal model of one size fits all. I will be quick to add that whereas one size does not fit all, there have to be certain commonalities which Professor Thiruvasagam has elaborated, because they will all need a syndicate or an executive body, an academic council, some method of drawing up a syllabus, some method of funding. These are things which you cannot get away with. But it basically boils down to looking at structure, processes, and methods. Governance is about structure, processes, and methods. AICTE has been in existence for a large number of decades, a fact which many people do not know. It was only converted into a statutory body later on with the coming in of a national education policy, the details of which I can't get into. But I was commissioned by the government along with Mr. P.P. Gupta, who was then the Secretary of Electronics, just limited office of a major electronic firm, to do the organization structure of AICTE. And that structure has been substantially untouched today, because the building blocks of that structure was there would be very few permanent employees, if at all, in AICTE, and they would all be on contract. Now, the thinking then was that there would be a dynamic flow of colleagues which will run the conscience-keeping process of higher technical education, a system which then is not followed in the University Grants Commission. Now, I'm not saying which one is superior, which one is not, but I'm citing Indian experiences of governance systems of apex institutions to emphasize how in India itself there are divergences of structure. Now, if there are divergences of structure in India, you have to accommodate the divergences of structure globally, and you cannot say that this model has to have a global application beyond a minimal, what I would say, of 20 to 30% of structure. My second emphasis would be to recognize that beyond structure, there are processes, because processes bring the structures to life. My limited experience in organization development, and I draw upon a background of history, anthropology, systems analysis, management, and a heavy exposure to technology to say the processes impact structures, and how structures operate in reality are not always the same as structures are designed on paper. And that is very important to understand. And let me repeat, very often structures do not operate in reality as a true representative of the design which was there in the initial conception, because processes impact them and structures get transmuted as you get along. Therefore, when you design the governance systems of higher education, you need to have structures which would be non-malleable, structures which cannot be changed merely by processes, and a part of structures which will open to change because the times change. Now, this is a daunting task which I would like to be documented in the country paper which India would submit on the governance processes, to recognize the variegated character of governance which university systems across the world would need to recognize. Any discussion on processes cannot beg the emphasis on method. It is not just how the structures work. It is not just what the processes entail, but how you do it. Most of us in this gathering today are people of some experiences who have dealt with identical concerns, but some of us develop the reputation of being an ogre. Some of us develop the reputation of being very strict. Some of us develop the reputation of being very friendly. And some of us develop the reputation of being so malleable. Go and talk to him, he will agree. So the method is just as important. And I think the point has been made that there is no shared understanding of how the key players in the governance of educational institutions are to be trained, and this is a huge gap. UNESCO would do itself credit if it tried to focus on some guidelines on training people for governance activities of educational institutions at a global level, while allowing for a certain degree of flexibility and malleability at the local level. A reference has already been made to the self-development goals, and I was revisiting the self-development goals, especially goal number 4, 16, and 17. And in a metaphorical way, I did all that I could from slipping beneath the table, because if you see the listing, they are so daunting, they leave almost nothing to imagination. Self-development goal 4 talks of no one is to be left behind. Very laudable goal, you can't quarrel with that goal, but the self-development goal lays down that this must be achievable by 2030. Now, how this can be done for a population as large as on this planet is something which I cannot discuss, but the recent experiences, even with vaccination efforts of COVID, please remember, when we are talking of the number of 1 billion jabs, we are talking of 1 billion jabs, not 1 billion people. This is a confusion which is in many people's mind. So covering a whole planet in a process of education where no one is left behind is certainly a huge and a desirable aspiration, but we will have to see how we can achieve it. But to get up and point a finger at where the self-development goals itself needs a rethinking is something which is the characteristic of, say, a person whose name is Vinashil Gautam, who has the habit of rushing in where the angels fear to tread, because there are holy cows which you are not supposed to touch. What am I implying by saying what I'm saying? Let's talk of self-development goals, and that's usually a good touchstone, but let's be practical at looking at it. Let me read out to you some of the characteristics which self-development goal 16 talks of. It talks of inclusive, equitable, quality. Pray tell me what is left out of it. If you are talking of inclusive, then you have to talk of accessibility. If you talk of accessibility, you talk of capacity. If you talk of capacity, you talk of a student-teacher ratio. If you talk of a student-teacher ratio, you talk of the infrastructure. And in a planetary situation where institutions run beneath trees, duly glorified by the Shantiniketan experience, on whose academic council I had the privilege of being the visitor's nominee, I'm by no means deriding a situation where you learn beneath the trees, but for heaven's sakes, please realize that even trees need to be nurtured in a particular way if you are to run a classroom beneath that. It is not just that you go beneath an eucalyptus and start teaching. You need to know a little bit of vegetation to know under which tree education can take place and under which tree education cannot take place. There is a difference between people and eucalyptus, but then I don't want to run basic references to botany in understanding. I would like to focus on the spirit of the reference. You look at the characteristics which the self-development goal 17 talks about. It talks of peace, justice, strong institutions. So I could carry out on this theme longer, but the purpose of my reference is when UNESCO takes forward its laudable mission of looking at 10 different aspects of the future of higher learning, it has to do some fundamental thinking of which are the principles which will be globally applicable, which of them will call for regional variations, and which of them will call for local adaptations. So I'm basically proposing a framework of reference for the country paper which India is supposed to present, and that could be, well, one of our major contributions, a recognition of the principles which you enunciate in the ultimate visualization of the conference to be held in Spain. Recognize that there will be universal principles, there will be regional variations, and there will be local conditions to factor in. I would like to continue my presentation into a recognition that, going back to Professor Thiruvasagam's remarks, there is a huge medley of institutions which UGC, AICTE, and I might say the state governments, as an example of India, which will be also universally applicable across the globe, are trying to grapple with. Now in India, education is a concurrent subject. We know that, we don't understand the meaning and significance, which means that the educational reforms, which is such a fancy with many of us, are really being carried out at multiple levels. I will just cite to you two examples of educational reforms. I have already talked of how AICTE converted itself from an institution to a statutory body and what were the experiences, what were the touchstones. Let me go back to 1948 when the Radhakrishnan Commission was set up and take a hop, step and jump to 1986 when a state like Bihar, and I had occasion to discuss this with the then Chief Minister of Bihar, had a problem of finding compatibility of all the reform interventions which Bihar government itself had carried out in the education sector. So a Sharma committee was formed to integrate the different aspirations of the different reform committees. This has happened much more at the central level. If you look at the University Grants Commission, between 1998 and 2016, there were over 8 significant regulations brought in, which were in nature as good as an act, because they talked of affiliations, they talked of maintenance of standards, and I'm not having a problem with that. What I'm flagging is the need to understand the complexity of governance even in a microcosm of the world like India, and recognizing that the country paper would need to flag it when you are wanting to be heard at a global level, as I hope we will be heard in Spain, because AIU has been chosen well, because AIU is an institution which has come into existence because of a willingness of universities to get together to create compatible governance norms so that the degrees are recognized across university boundaries. So if the future pattern of education globally has to be determined, the framework of reference which Association of Indian Universities has could well be the framework of governance of global patterns. And remember, and this is not an occasion to get into the ups and downs of the fate of UNESCO, how money has come in, how money has dried, how people have refused to give funds, how countries nominate people to UN bodies, how people aspire to go to Paris to become a foreign return, and what else. There is a whole universe there in the operation of UNESCO. And I don't want to get into the details of it, but my own case is UNESCO is a much needed body, and in whatever incarnation it is today, it is doing good work. And above all, it is the only hope of seeing that thoughts related to science, education, culture are shared at a non-political level in the interest of future generations of this planet. Having said that, I would like to make 2 or 3 concluding observations, because I know distinguished speakers are to follow me. And I have never suffered from the notion, if I know something, it has to be said on every occasion. And as some of you know, I began my education in Britain when I was 5 years old, but then I've been brought up in strong Sanskritist tradition, which believes that discipline is the core of learning. And it may not be out of place to mention that Indian traditions of learning need some attention to be incorporated in the university system of education, which we are trying to implement in India. And I think there is a thinking to that effect, and it delights people like me. Similarly, in other countries, their local traditions have to be factored into the educational method. And I might say there are sterling examples of this, say in Brazil, in Malaysia. If I had the time, I would have elaborated upon it. Dr. Pani will testify that, like many things on which he's a silent member working from the backdrops and nobody knows he's around, but people like me who have a habit of even finding out where does this energy come from, know the sort of role Dr. Pani plays. It is published in a book edited by Dr. Pankaj Mittal on re-envisioning education sector in India. She has edited that. Dr. Pani will testify that that is a Association of Indian Universities.
Sir, it's reimagining Indian universities, sir.
Agreed. And my paper there is reimagining Indian universities, constructs and context. Go through that, and I have cited international examples of where countries like us are far ahead in recognizing with respect the local tradition. It is only here that we feed media on debates on which knowledge stream, which method is significant, which knowledge stream is not significant. And since I have a certain reputation even as a columnist, that's not a road I want to walk. But all that I'm saying is you can't think of global traditions without incorporating local traditions of learning. And I might use this occasion to say that my credentials as an anthropologist, and I have already referred to it, I had to give weight to what I'm now going to say. If communities in this country have survived for over 10,000, 11,000 years with their identity, it is not as if they are inviting interventions to convert them from their identity to artificial intelligence, though I have nothing against artificial intelligence. All I'm saying is you have to take the strengths from where they come. tribal methods of learning has intrinsic strengths, which my field work has brought across to me. And if I had the time, I would have elaborated upon it. Have we ever seriously looked at the strengths of the tribal system? To look at the iterative processes and verbal learning through which they have trained their generations, so that over 9% of this country's population still has an identity. And if you are to recognize a significant fundamental component of Indian identity, it takes some of its shades from the tribal identity. Now, this needs to be reflected in a global system of curriculum planning, methods of instruction. Therefore, through Dr. Pani and Dr. Theruvasagam, I would like to urge the Association of Indian Universities to be cognizant of this, and I know I'm talking to a receptive audience, and to make the country paper reflect these needs, so that the richness of traditions that exist in India and other parts of the world create a future which is not just machine learning and whatever else. And mind you, I have no quarrels with that. As was referred to in my biodata, I have spent nearly 3 decades in what I call Mazduron ki Basti, the land of the workers that is in IIT Delhi. And they still haven't forgiven me for some of the things which I did, including creating a management department in an engineering institution, but that's another story. Some of them, most of them welcomed it, otherwise that department would not have been created. Why do I refer to that? One of the greatest strengths of our autonomous institutions is their malleability. IITs, IIMs, and several of the central universities are good examples of it. Let us do recognize that there is some ash around, but let us not be always putting that ash on our head. Let us simultaneously also look at some of our achievements and let's share it with the world. How our so-called rigid institutions have been world-class, and how we can be, as is the aspiration of the present government system in India, some of the thinking of which is reflected by some senior people who will be speaking soon. We have our experience to share from which many people can learn. I would like to stop there because I could say more things if I had more time to say it in, but I have always believed that anyone who gets up to speak should be reminded of 2 things. One, as I've already mentioned, discipline is a precious commodity, and begin with self-discipline. And the second is, not only do you not have to say everything that you know, there may be wiser and better people following you. Therefore, just step aside, listen to them, because why should you not give yourself a chance to learn? And thereby, I look forward to listening to Professor Sahasrabuddhe, whom I have been an admirer for long years, and I'm quite sure the organizers of this session will take care of that adequately. I'm grateful for Professor Laldinpoi Pente, who many of you may not know, hasn't been having the best of health in the last few weeks, but she is an indomitable person, refuses to say that she will be taking a lead back position. And though I have been reluctant to pose some administrative clarification issues to her, she would handle it herself. Long live that spirit. This is what this session is about. And I think we have a long way to go, because basically Indians are what they are, basically global in character, basically open to experience, and basically willing to share their experience for a learning purpose. Remember, the core word is learning. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy for this occasion. Look forward to listening to others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. You know, with all these presentations, talks, I'm feeling much, much better. Thank you for the great contribution when the vision paper is being written. Definitely, I think we will get back to you again, sir. Our next speaker today is the person I think we can call our own. He has been with us in the Northeast India in our development since a long time ago and is not even new to Mizoram. Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, is currently chairman of All India Council for Technical Education, the AICTE. Professor Anil Sahasrabuddhe has held several important academic research and administrative positions at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Tata Consulting Engineers, Northeastern Regional Institute of Science and Technology, NERIST, in Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh, IIT Guwahati, and College of Engineering, Pune, COEP, prior to joining at AICTE as chairman. As an academician and researcher in NERIST and IIT Guwahati, and as director COEP, he has taken up several new initiatives for academic, curricular, and co-curricular activities, entrepreneurship, research, and good governance. He has been an architect of reforms in technical education at AICTE, which include mandatory student induction and internship, faculty certification, and ATAL faculty development programs, in which I also have been involved many times, creating first ever India's MOOC platform Swayam, examination reforms, innovation movement, series of hackathons, Indian knowledge systems, new funding schemes for supporting students, faculty, and institutes. He is chairman, Basic Science Research, Empowered Committee of UGC and Swayam Board. He is a fellow of ISTE, IET, Institution of Engineers, and INAE. He has been bestowed with several awards, which include Maha Entrepreneur Award 2011 of Praj Industries, Jeevan Gaurav Puraskar Lifetime Achievement Award from MIT World Peace University, Pune. In 2019, Mahatma Gandhi Leadership Award from Indian Achievers Forum and CSR Times 2019. He has also been conferred Ravi J. Mathai National Fellowship Awards by AIMS 2021 recently. So I present to you most humbly the one and only Professor Anil Sahasrabuddhe to talk on system level governance in higher education. Sir.
Thank you, Professor Laldin Puri Fente. We have amidst us previous speakers who eloquently spoke on this particular good governance or governance models for our country. Professor Sam Siva Rao, Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, and we had Colonel Dr. Thiruvasagam, who is also Vice Chancellor and also President of AIU. Dr. Pani, Professor Vinay Shil Gautam was exquisite in his talking about how Indian system can be projected in the UNESCO forum in our whatever formulation we are going to make hereafter. A spirited speech that he had given in terms of what all has been happening, what needs to happen. I think I congratulate him. Followed by me, this particular session, there is going to be sessions by Professor Mehta. Shailendra Mehta is a good friend. He is part of the IKS of ministry. Professor Ramesh Ganta and I don't know, Professor Furkan Kamar, I didn't see on the list here, but he might be also speaking. So I think the topic given was on system level governance in higher education. So I was thinking for the last 7 years, right from this government came, Honorable Prime Minister Modi has been talking about one important phrase, minimum government, maximum governance. And all the time people are asking what is this called minimum government and maximum governance. Essence of this is the governance will be such that it is citizen friendly, accountable, and also the processes that are involved must be easy. Reduce the decision making layers, reduce the burden on compliances, number of compliances, huge number of laws that exist which overlap or which have no relevance have to be removed, and then single window clearance. Some of these things are very important. This will lead to faster, transparent, and maybe many times, although my previous speaker, Professor Vinay Shil Gautam, was often saying about AI and ML, there can be use of technologies like AI and ML for division into our areas where we can make the systems possible to make some kind of a decision which is much more robust, much more transparent, and therefore technologies can always enable. But certainly sometimes it cannot be so rigid, and we need to be flexible, like giving autonomy to institutions in order to operate. That is also equally important. And therefore, when we talk about innovative practices in governance, the previous decisions which are taken, precedence is many times not known, and therefore we take decisions which are different from the past, and then there are court cases. How can we avoid all of this is what is minimum government and maximum governance. And that is what is important in all fields, be it in terms of government departments. I'm taking simple examples of whether it is railways or air travel or taxation, where income tax is to be paid, or we get a passport or visa, or the salaries to be obtained by us on time, to pension for the retired people, then the various types of healthcare systems or agriculture. I think everywhere we need what is known as good governance. And this will come out of all that what we do in education sector. And that's why good governance in education is more important, because whoever we produce here, graduates, they will go and occupy these positions. And therefore, if you really have to have a good maximum governance, minimum government philosophy to be adopted, it should first come in education sector. And therefore, whatever Vinayshil Gautamji was telling, and earlier to that Dr. Thirusagam was telling, I think there is a lot of relevance. Of course, since independence for the last 75 years, there have been not only UGC Act, AICT Act, and many other regulatory bodies which have come into existence. And there have been, unfortunately, a lot of overlapping powers of these institutions. And that is why there have been a lot of problems as well. So I will come to that part a little later. But most importantly, system level governance in higher education must be such that all the stakeholders who are associated with the education system, they should have no grievances, or even if there are some minor grievances here and there, they must be addressed as efficiently, expeditiously as possible. I don't know there can be any better mechanism than make use of technology. You will have frequently asked questions. They are available so that people will know in which situation what is required to be done for the regulatory framework to be adhered to the extent that sometimes if there are problems and delays, how they can be handled or taken care of. This will always be possible rather than in a physical space by writing letters, and even emails sometimes are lost, but a robust platform where everything is recorded and there are, tinkering mechanisms where people are going to be reminded that something is not happening, please do it quickly. I think that is where CP Grams portal, grievance portal or RTI portal, which have been developed for increasing honesty, integrity, and the transparent mechanism of redressal of the grievances. This is very, very important, and which is also happening. But ultimately, the entire education is not only for education per se, but also for creating good human beings, good citizens. Of course, everyone would like to have employability. Therefore, the parents will feel that my child whom I have put in education, paying so much of high fees, must become employable. Some job must be available for that individual. Some of them who can afford or some have interest, they can become entrepreneurs. But how do we do this? You require not just regulatory mechanism, but we also require facilitation mechanism, and that's what AICT has started adhering to in the last 7 years. I don't know how many of you know, this was a pure regulatory one from 1987 when the Act was passed in the terms of engineering, management, hotel management, applied art, craft, pharmacy, as well as architecture. But unfortunately, because of overlapping functions between architecture program and the engineering or whatever technology programs in AICT, the courts have come in, unfortunately, and then said this should be done by so-and-so agency and not this agency. So in the new national education policy, some of these things are going to be likely to be ironed out, and that's a very interesting part of it. I'll come to that later. But most important part is the transparency which is necessary and required. Now I will deal with first some of the things which new policy made some statements and how we have tried to introduce it or how we have tried to incorporate them in our processes. Because when Shailendra Mehta will speak, he will talk about some other things, but both Tirusagam as well as Vinayshil Gautam have raised some issues, and I would like to reflect on them. There must be a structure. Obviously, there is a structure necessary. There is a process which is necessary, a strategy of implementation, and different types of methods. And unless we have clarity on that, I think we will not be able to do. As far as AICT is concerned, in the Act itself, provision of a council of 51 members, 21-member executive committee who take normal decisions, and this is going to meet every couple of months, and then decisions are taken and they are implemented. And main task had been all the time in terms of regulation. The COW committee, which recommended that AICT should also be a facilitator, and that is what we started doing. And I will give you 7-8 examples of how facilitation has begun in terms of, number one, many universities were not revising their curriculum. We started curriculum revision on our own and then gave it as on a platter to the universities to adapt, and we don't say one cap fits for all, and you have every flexibility to make amends to that. But basic essence which is required by the industry, by the society, by the government must be incorporated. We can't teach some 18th, 19th century skills for a graduate who is going to get a job in 21st century, and that's why one of them was that. But when we added this in the curriculum, be it AI, IoT, machine learning, deep learning, robotics, 3D printing, these are all emerging areas. 36% of the existing jobs are going to vanish and jobs are going to be created in these domains. Data analytics, we have cloud computing, cyber security, and how we can train our faculty members who will in turn handle the classes. And that's why under Atal Academy, we have whole-scale, large-scale faculty development programs which began actually before the pandemic, but we continued in the pandemic in an online mode using technology platforms, and our efforts were quadrupled because the number of people who can join in single webinar or single workshop of 5 days was 200 in an online, whereas it was only 50 in the physical space. And then we are now in a position to get experts from all over the world, because it's only the time zone of the particular country which we have to somehow adapt. Someone will have to remain awake in the night or in the early morning, and then they can give lectures to our Indian faculty members, and this has really created an enthusiasm, and we are having now 2 world records under our belt from the World Book of Records for training maximum number of faculty members during pandemic. 1.5 lakh plus last year, and this year already nearly 1 lakh, and we are going to do it 2 lakh. How many workshops? 948 last time, and this time we have planned for 1500. I think phenomenal, inculcation of the what we call as training programs for our faculty members. We also have a value-based system which is to be introduced, the Universal Human Values Program, under which student induction program as well as an elective or earlier, but now we have graduated to a mandatory course in curriculum for universal human values. It starts with all aspects that a human being has to incorporate in his life, in the entire life cycle. How do we train students? But before training students, how do we train faculty members? Those workshops also have trained more than 55,000 faculty members in this pandemic period. So these are very important things. But for employability, we also need what we know as internships. For the medical education, it has always been mandatory that after the graduation, whatever exams are over, one has to go through the hospital for 1 year. But in engineering, it was not like that. Even management, it was not mandatory. There is, of course, immersion program, there are internship programs, but they're all optional. So what we made is internship as a mandatory phenomenon. For about 6 months, one has to go through an industry, understand the processes that are involved, and then one can become not only employable, can become an entrepreneur and will be able to deliver. Then the other reform which we have undertaken is an examination reform. And this is very significant and important because question papers right from KG to PG in our Indian system, they are all based on rote learning and memory-based questions. I'm not against the memory. Some part of the thing has to be in our brain to be stored, to be utilized as and when required. But the questions being asked in a manner that you only remember and get marks, whereas you have not understood the essence of it. the understanding of the subject to critical thinking, analytical ability, creativity, innovation. If such questions are not there, we are not going to produce a generation which is going to be innovative, which will only be follower but not a leader. If you have to create leaders, I think innovation is must. And we have an innovation cell movement also happening, but examination is an important aspect. So I think these are important facilitation mechanisms. And in order to make faculty understand them, not only we have workshops continuously being held, 5-day workshops for all these, but we have two other schemes called Margadarshak and Margadarshan schemes, under which a well-performing institution is allowed to handhold, mentor 10 institutions, or some retired faculty from IITs, IIMs, or some of the best universities, some people from the industry. They will go to an institution, stay there for a week, and charge up the atmosphere. I was saying the way Professor Vinayshil Gautam was really charging us all, just about half an hour ago. I think we need such people to go to the colleges and lift the negativity that exists and create a positive atmosphere in those institutions. Now coming to the compliance, which I said that for good governance and system level governance, I'm splitting it into two parts. One is on the part of the regulatory bodies, which AICT is doing. And the policy has given a famous statement, the regulation must be light but tight. Many people ask, what is this light but tight? Light is one which is based on self-disclosure. You don't go and trouble an institution in terms of what facilities they have. If there are some standards, you announce them, and the institution on their own will say that we do possess all of them, and you believe them. And that is what is light. But if someone has cheated the system and we receive a complaint, and therefore against that grievance or complaint, we go and inspect and find out that the institution has really cheated the system, we have to come heavily on that institution in terms of penal action, and therefore it is tight. So this light but tight is the one which was required to be done. And before even, there are many other initiatives which are required to be undertaken under National Education Policy. AICT started self-disclosure based approval process. Not only that, we have two features which we have incorporated. One of them is what we call graded autonomy. Institutions who are well performing, who have been accredited by National Board of Accreditation at level 1, level 2. We have category 1 and category 2. They are given multiple years of approval, and they don't have to come running around to AICT for the approvals at all for 10 years, 8 years, 6 years, depending on how many years they have got the autonomy or how many years they have got the accreditation. This is one part. The second part is we disclose that everything that is required is available. In case of new institutions, obviously there was a requirement of going and inspecting. We stopped the physical inspections, whether it is scrutiny of documents of land, building, etc., to actual physical inspection of building is ready or not, approvals of the buildings are there or not, completion is there or not, fire certificate is there or not, whether faculty are there or not, whether equipment are there or not. There used to be physical inspections by experts, and we have stopped them thanks to pandemic. They were not even able to go anyway. So we have used technology to visual inspection of that in an online mode. And everything is recorded. So no one can claim that this was shown and it is not being recorded, nor someone will not say that someone has not shown at all and therefore we have not recorded. Either way, both cannot have any say on this matter because everything gets recorded. So there is no chance of corruption. So zero corruption mechanism has been evolved and we have started using it. But still, one of the things which has not been possible, which has required to be done, is one nation, one data. I'm coming to this very important because when you are talking about governance, we have several activities for which a institution is required to give the same data in multiple different formats. This is unfortunate. Today, with the technology being so enabling, why are we asking this data repeatedly? AICT asks the data, UGC asks the data, Ministry asks the data, state government asks the data, TechWhip asks the data. If you want to apply for accreditation in NAC or NBA, you ask the data. We have a portal by the ministry itself, which is called as iShape portal. They ask the data, and 90% of the data is all overlapping. And only about 5-10% of the data may be unique. If you all add it together in one portal and say that once in a year you provide this data, I think how smooth it would be. Unfortunately, many people are bogged down by only filling the data whole year, because 8 agencies are asking this data. So this is another way of making it a very transparent system where only once you give the data and we believe on that. That's all, simple. And then all things will happen virtually, virtual inspection, virtual appeal committees. And this we have already graduated and we must take it forward. Now, the next part is that of the institutional governance mechanism. When we are talking about system, it is both at the national level regulatory bodies and on the other side, the institutions themselves. Every institution must have a board of governors, which must have not only an eminent academician as the chair of the board, willing to give time, but also members who are drawn from industry, drawn from alumni, drawn from some well-known citizens, and that will become a holistic approach, including some of the present students and faculty members being part of it. The system becomes transparent. Everyone knows what is happening. There is no secrecy around it. And then all the minutes of the meeting should be posted on the website. Many of them do not do it. Once you do it, your RTI applications will come down, your grievances will come down. And even if after doing all of this there are grievances, the grievance redressal mechanism has to be absolutely robust. I think there must be escalation. If someone who is required to answer to the grievance is not doing it, immediately it must go to the higher up. And then within 10-15 days, no stakeholder, whether it is student, faculty, staff, or it may be outsider like industry or parents, or even government or any general citizen has any problem about any issue which is happening in an academic institution or in AICT or UGC, we are answerable and we must answer to those queries. I think that is very important, and how fast we do it. And that is where the good governance model comes in. And I had a very interesting mechanism of knowing, learning when I was in College of Engineering, Pune, as part of the TechWhip project, World Bank funded project. There was what is known as Good Governance Guide, and there were a lot of guidelines. And one thing which we never know or knew in an academic institution was they had said that all members of the faculty as well as from the board of governors and senate members must sign a register of interests in the same manner as in the companies. We didn't understand what is this register of interest. We knew interests in terms of sports, cultural activities. These are our interests. But they said, no. This is essential because when we are taking any decision, it has to be ensured that there are no conflict of interest. And if you are part of the committee meeting, and if that is conflicting with the interests of yours, you must withdraw yourself from taking a decision. You must go out for some time, come back after the decision is taken. I think these are the things which obviously our academic institutions unfortunately were not following, and these are all very important things which have been incorporated now in this. Now coming to the leadership issue, you also talked about leadership. Unless leaders are trained in all these facets, we will not get right vice chancellors, right principals, right directors. And therefore, 2 programs have been started by the ministry. One for all IITs, IIMs are allowed to have a 3-week program for inculcating leadership, 2 weeks in India and 1 week in one of the foreign universities to see best practices over there and come back. AICT itself has its own under UKRI project, UK India Education Research Initiative under that. I think we have been trying our best in terms of these aspects. But now coming to the new policy where this multi-regulatory bodies are there, how do we overcome them and how we will have a single regulatory body is what is talked about. That is called the Higher Education Commission of India, which will amalgamate UGC, AICTE, NCTE and many other organizations like Council of Architecture, one single body of regulation. And when such a body arises, conflicts between regulatory bodies will dissolve. Today, for an architecture education by a deemed university, one has to take approval of Council of Architecture, AICTE, UGC, and then many times some state government also will fiddle there. So we will be able to eliminate all of that and the governance will become much more smoother. And then there are 4 verticals under that. One is regulatory one, the second one is standard setting one, the third one is the accreditation one, the fourth one is the funding one. So very clear demarcation of 4 different activities under higher education to be taken care of by one apex body with 4 verticals. I think once this is introduced, the phenomenon of autonomy for institutions will become much, much better. People from private institutions who are always troubled by the regulatory bodies will feel sigh of relief that only there is one place where we have to go for our approval, and one stop whatever approval which we talk about in good governance model will be established. So I think my time is running out. I'm seeing the clock. I'm completing my nearly half an hour. So I only wish that all of these changes which the new education policy has talked about will come as fast as possible. Some of them we have introduced. Some of them are in the pipeline. Many of them should happen, and we can increase our gross enrollment ratio to about 50% in the next 10-15 years. Quality of education is ensured. While access equity is important, quality and excellence is more important, and that somehow we had neglected for some time. We will resurrect our quality, and then we can become truly Vishwaguru. Vineshilji, you were telling about Indian knowledge system and our learning system. Whether it is in tribal areas or in many rural areas, we have our own system of learning. In fact, I was looking at some ancient text. There are 51 different methods of learning, and one cap fits for all doesn't happen. And probably our routine classroom, tutorial, experiential learning, experiments, project-based learning, these are all few parameters which we all talk about today from the Western world. But we have 51 different ways. Why can't we tell this to the whole world? Therefore, an Indian Knowledge Systems division is established by the Ministry in AICT. Dr. Shailendra Mehta is also one of the members of the high-powered, high-commission meeting. He's going to speak something later. I'm sure not only we become best on ourselves, but we will provide that best thing to the rest of the world. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
TP, unmute.
I'm sorry. I thought I had unmuted. Thank you, sir, Professor Sahasrabudhi. Sorry, that's a little bit difficult for me to pronounce. I'm sorry for that, sir, for the comprehensive and perspicacious insights on a very important topic. And since we have to move on, I will be introducing the next speaker, Dr. Shailendra Raj Mehta, who is currently the president and director of MICA. And prior to this, he headed Oro University and Ahmedabad University as chairman of the board of management and acting vice chancellor and as vice chancellor, respectively. Earlier, he was visiting professor of business policy at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and he returned to India in 2006 to head the collaboration between Duke University's corporate education arm and IIM Ahmedabad as regional managing director of India, West Asia, and the Middle East. Prior to that, he was at Purdue University for 16 years, where he had taught economics and strategic management. While at Purdue, he co-founded Simulex Incorporated, a high technology company in the Purdue Research Park. Currently, he is the co-founder of a fintech startup, S-Angel, of which he also serves as the chairman. Over the years, Dr. Mehta has consulted with and also taught senior executives worldwide, including executives from North America, Europe, Africa, as well as Asia. The companies that he has worked with at the CEO, CXO, or board level includes, among many, the Bajaj Group, Bharat Petroleum, Black Management Forum of South Africa, Lilly, Genpact, Honeywell, IBM, Infosys, Lockheed Martin, Medtronic, Microsoft, P&G, PricewaterhouseCoopers, State Bank of India, and the Tata Group as well, and many agencies of the Indian and US governments, among others. He has done numerous programs for civil servants, including senior IRS, IFS, and IAS officers. Dr. Mehta has done extensive research in the areas of entrepreneurship, industrial organization, information economics, and experimental economics. His research was the subject of a full-length review by The Economist. His work on creating world-class universities has been discussed around the world and profiled in over 10 languages, including Chinese, Russian, French, German, and Arabic, among others. And he is rated as one of the top researchers in the field of strategy in the country. He completed his BA and MA from Delhi University and his MPhil from Balliol College, Oxford, and his PhD from Harvard University. May I now request the highly accomplished Dr. Shailendra Raj Mehta to kindly take the platform to deliver his discourse on HED institutions, governance, and responsiveness to dynamic contexts. Sir, may I invite you now?
Thank you so much, Dr. Laltanpui, Professor Fente, Professor Gautam, Professor Thiruvasagam, Professor Sahasrabudhe, and many other distinguished panelists and friends. I want to speak in two parts. One, I will share a framework with you that I think will be useful in contextualizing the challenges that we have, number one, and I'll share some data and some observations. And then I will improvise a little bit because I wanted to respond to many of the wonderful points that our speakers have made. So finally, I will speak about some of the issues that they have raised. Obviously not all, because A, I'm not capable, and B, it would take us too far afield. But essentially that would be in two parts. And what I've done is that I've prepared a presentation in the interest of efficiency that I'm going to share with you. So I hope you're able to see it here. Yeah. So let me just switch to the full screen view. Just a minute, please. All right. All right, you can see the full screen, right? Okay, excellent. So I'll proceed at jet speed initially, and then perhaps we can reflect a little bit on India. So first I'll contextualize. Now, Clark Kerr, who was the founding president of the University of California system, one of the crown jewels of the US education enterprise, he mentioned this very interesting fact that in the Western world, only 85 institutions have survived the last 500 years, only 85, of which 3 are parliaments, one is the Catholic Church, 10 are about Swiss cantons, one is the Bank of Siena in Italy, and 70 are universities. Okay. The university form is the longest lived institution that we have created as a human race. It is also arguably one of the most important institutions. Now, the Europeans have forgotten and the North Americans have forgotten that India invented the notion of the university. And we had not one of them, but 7 of them, right? And unfortunately, all of them were violently destroyed. And as Professor Sahasrabudhe knows, and some of you may be intrigued to find out, I'm writing a history of these 7 universities based on original sources. I thought it would take me 1 year. And now I'm on to my 10th year. I think it's just about getting done. And over the years, I've given seminars on this topic all over the world, including most recently at Oxford, before that at Yale, MIT, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Indian Institute of Science in Shimla and others. So I'll pull a lot of material that I've shared in other forums and just give you glimpses of this. So first of all, these 7 universities, which one were these? It's important. We talked about excellence, creation of excellence. Now, this is something that we founded. And for 1800 years, please don't forget, for 1800 years, one or more of these universities at different points in time existed. From 6th century BC, Takshala, to 1203, when the last university, Sompura, was destroyed. For 1800 years, India had the finest institutions of higher education. Takshala, the oldest one, destroyed in 450 by White Huns. Then Skandagupta formed Nalanda, to get away from the region of disturbance, which was Punjab at that time. And then Vallabhi was founded by the Maitraka dynasty. And then later on, Vikramshil, Jagaddal, Sompura, and Vedantapuri. So these were world-class universities from day one. The whole world came there. I don't want to go into all those details which I've talked about elsewhere, but it's good to remind us of who we are and where we came from. Also, remember, great universities and great countries go hand in hand. So I've put together this table from the work of Angus Maddison, seminal work. He devoted his life to mapping the global GDP of the world, right, country by country. And here you will see that not only did India have the finest universities for 1800 years, but for 1500 years, we had the finest, the largest, and the most powerful economy in the world. I've just shared with you, I've computed the shares, the global GDP shares from Angus Maddison, and they're there for you to see. And the red ones are the countries which are dominant. So essentially for 1500 years, India was also dominant as an economy. Only by about 1500 does China start to catch up. And then of course, 100 years later, everybody else overtakes India for reasons that we understand very well. Now, this diagram indicates the global center of gravity. 2000 years ago, it was just around Takshala. If you look at the whole GDP of the world and map it on the globe and take the center of gravity of the world was Takshala. Now, the good news is it's coming back, with the rise of India and China, it's coming right back to our area, as it were. And this is absolutely the right time to be thinking about re-energizing our universities. Now, let me give you a summary of what I have found over the last 10 years. I have shared this in a variety of environments, but essentially, a great modern university today is built. And remember, the history of the university, if you start with Takshala in 6th century BC and come to now, the history is 2600 years old. In those 2600 years, I argue in my book that I'm working on, there have been 24 major innovations, 18 of which happened in India. Now, of course, not all of them happened in one university, but if you put all the 7 universities in India, the 18 major innovations happened there, including the thing which happened last, women's education. By the way, we also pioneered women's education 1500 years ago. Nobody knows about this. I have collected all the evidence from primary sources, from texts and epigraphs and all of that. But that is for a later time. So 18 innovations. 6 more, I won't go into those, were added, 3 more in Europe. The scientific method, unity of teaching and research. Scientific method is, of course, Bacon, Francis Bacon. Unity of teaching and research is Humboldt. Learned societies happens outside of universities, starting in England. Unitary control is pioneered in the United States. Alumni governance and the commercialization of university research is also pioneered in the US. So 3 European innovations, 3 American innovations, and 18 Indian innovations. Of course, Europe rediscovers those 18, and almost, this is the fascinating thing about the book, that when I compare India and Europe, Europe rediscovers those same challenges, solves it in roughly the same order for roughly the same reasons. And these 18 innovations that I listed, which I list here also, and when they happened in India. So this is in some sense a slide that summarizes the timeline of my book. That is the 7 universities, what were the different innovations that they pioneered, and when did they pioneer it? Roughly all this is given here. Takshala, the oldest, because it was also destroyed the earliest, the later innovations, that is public funding of education, endowments, competing centers, autonomy, corporate form, centralized university, women's education, that didn't happen at Takshala. And surprisingly, the most evolved university was not Nalanda. That is also something that my book will demonstrate conclusively, I hope, that the most evolved university from an institutional point of view and the most radical innovations, including women's education, was Vallabhi. It lasted only about, founded in roughly 530 AD, destroyed in 788, hardly lasted 250 years, but innovated unbelievably, including creating one of the most powerful intellectual education environments that you can possibly imagine. I mean, huge advances in philosophy, linguistics, study of traditional Indian knowledge systems, and of course, mathematics and science. Many of the great mathematicians, the first commentator on the Rig Veda, all of them were at Vallabhi. And of course, a great Buddhist university founded by a woman, surprisingly, nobody knows this. And at least people who wrote about it died 70 years ago. And since then, it has been largely forgotten. So all this will come. Now, why is this tough? Now, I said that it's the longest lasting institution. And one reason why it has lasted so long is because universities are focused on values, right? All the great universities that have survived have focused on values. But they have survived in spite of being, as it were, the most complex institution created by man. Now, why is that? I'm an economist. So from an economics point of view, remember, even if the markets work when there are no market failures, right? The university, and there are 4 market failures, basically. Each one, essentially the people who wrote about it got Nobel Prizes. And in fact, for screening and information asymmetry, I think at least a dozen Nobel Prizes have been given. So these were huge innovations in economics. But if a good has a characteristic of public goods, then it cannot be provided privately. You have to have public provision of a public good. And as you know, knowledge is a public good. So if you leave it to the market is not going to produce enough knowledge. Similarly, if you have asymmetric information, that is, if some people know more about a product than others, then again, it'll lead to huge problems. And this is well understood now since the work of the early game theorists, 50 years ago, starting with John Nash and others. You may have seen the film, A Beautiful Mind. So that is where it started in 1953, or 70 years ago, actually now. And all this is, universities also are subject to market failure because education creates a huge asymmetry between the producers and the consumers. The consumers just don't know how to evaluate knowledge, whereas the producers know how to do it, and that knowledge is not easy to transmit. Similarly, there's huge screening, right? The other reason why universities are extremely difficult to you cannot have a for-profit university, is because a university that admitted people on the basis of their ability to pay would be doomed to failure, because then you would admit duffers, right? Rich duffers is what you would do, and that is precisely what you do not want to do. So right from the days of Takshila, if you were a good student, they would find a way to fund your education. In Takshila, and I gave this paper recently at Ahmedabad, I went through the Pali sources, the 570 Jataka stories about the life of the Buddha, 105 of which mention Takshila, or Takkasila as it is called in Pali. So I did a statistical analysis of those and actually computed in 95 of those Jatakas, Takshila is mentioned as an educational environment. In many of those stories, we know who went to study there, what was their caste, what did they study, how much did they pay for it, what did they do when they came back. So I prepared a table, a fascinating table about how it worked. And there were multiple ways in which poor students were accommodated. So if you were rich, if you were a king's son, for example, there's a story where the king of Banaras sends his son and his tailor's son to study at Takshila. Now, obviously, in his case, in the case of his tailor's son, he funds his education. The king funds his education. But if you were the tailor's son who was not going with the king's son, how would you fund your education? So the acharyas of Takshila, that included people like Panini, almost certainly, Chanakya, most certainly, they would say you have a multiple set of options. Either you can do a work-study program, that is, you help with my teaching in the day, and I will teach you separately at night, or you pay me after you graduate and you make your money later. So you pay me. So they had all these programs, and the reason was they always wanted the best students to study there. And of course, the fourth reason for market failure is that knowledge creates externalities. If I'm educated, it's not just me who is benefiting, the whole society benefits. So again, the market is not able to capture the full benefits. Therefore, again, you need somehow to get away from the profit motive in universities. And of course, the other reason, this is something, especially since the US passed the Bayh-Dole Act, which the Economist called the greatest legislative accomplishment post-war, right? In India, we don't tend to understand the importance of this law. In 1980, Bayh-Dole, the senators Bayh and Dole, passed this law, which basically allowed for universities to commercialize their knowledge and to keep the benefits of that as part of their endowment, right? So you may be surprised to note that the polymerase chain reaction patent, Columbia has it, right? Which is the basis for all of our genetic testing and everything else. The PCR tests that we do for COVID and all of that. Each year it was generating $360 million just by way of royalty until recently. Now that's what has funded the growth of universities. And so now universities, it's universally recognized, especially the example of Stanford shows it, that there are innovation engines and engines for growth, they're carriers of culture, soft power, and all of these are of great interest. So creating world-class universities is of the utmost importance. Now, if you look at this list, I'm actually using the Chinese list for a very interesting reason, because most of the universities that are great, with one exception on this list of the top 30 universities, they're all European or North American. The only exception is the University of Tokyo in Asia. And most of the rankings are from either US or Europe. The American ones are biased in favor of the American universities, and the Europeans are biased in favor of European universities. So using this Shanghai Jiaotong University list tells you something very interesting, that if you look at the top 30 universities in the world, the overwhelming majority are American. If you look at the top 10, 8 out of these top 10 are American. So why did they become so good? I gave a talk around on this many years ago, and again recently with updated data. Why are they so good? Again, there are traditional answers, but they're not particularly convincing, because many of these factors apply to other countries, but nobody has really been able to copy the Americans. Now, why is that? So I argue that there are basically 5 forms of governance that you can have. And governance is the most important thing that you need to get right to create a great university. You can have governance by the state. For example, for state universities or central universities, it's the state which determines the governing board, by and large, with the exception of IIMs. Or you can have it by trusts, which is what many of the charitable trusts do. Or you can have shareholders if you have for-profit universities. Some countries like the Philippines and the US allow for for-profit universities. But I just demonstrated to you that because of these market failures, no for-profit university will ever survive to create a knowledge creation center, and therefore those are mostly irrelevant. They don't teach you education, they do training. So we'll ignore those. So delete shareholders. That leaves these other 4. Faculty governance, by the way, is the worst. I show in my paper, Columbia, which was the richest university in the world at one point, they had 100% faculty governance. The faculty ate up the endowment. And they had to work very hard to reverse that. And ultimately, what worked for the US universities was something that Harvard innovated 150 years ago. I tell that story in my paper. Harvard, most people don't know, even today at Harvard, was a Sarkari university. If you don't believe me, go look up the Constitution of the state of Massachusetts, where it is located. Section 4 of the Constitution is devoted to Harvard because it was a state university. On the 29th of April, 1865, Harvard was turned over to the alumni from the state. And since then, for the last 150 years, 100% of the board of Harvard is comprised of alumni. And that is when it started to become a great university 150 years ago. And the transition was completed in a few decades. Now, why is alumni governance so important? So as I mentioned, the first university to bring alumni governance was Harvard. Why it happened, again, I tell that story in my paper, and then it spreads like wildfire. So now, why is this important? Very, very quickly, and I'll go at lightning speed now. If you think about IIT Delhi, who knows and who cares most about IIT Delhi? Well, the state cares about it to some extent. The city of Delhi cares about it to some extent. And many others care about it, but nobody cares more about it than the alumni. Why? Because if IIT Delhi is doing well in the rankings for your entire life, you will be known as a graduate of IIT Delhi. And if it's high in the rankings, if it's a global world-class institution, you will basically benefit from that glow. So therefore, this is why the alumni model works so well at Harvard and all the American universities which follow it, which is pretty much everybody, that you give control of the university to those who value it the most, who know it the most, and who care for it the most, and therefore have fast, efficient decision-making. So anyway, so look at this table. This came as a shock to the Americans because they had not even looked at this table when I first compiled it 10 years ago. So this is now the latest data. Princeton, look at the top universities as of 2020, right, in the world, or in the US right now. Princeton, Harvard, Columbia, the top three have 100% alumni on the board. MIT has 75%, Yale has 100%, Stanford has 93% alumni, and so on down the line. One exception is California, which is as low as 50, but even that is more than 50%. Even the great public universities, they are all alumni controlled. I taught at a great public university, Purdue. 90% of the trustees are alumni, even though they are appointed by the state. So that is basically the reason why they are so important. So now, very quickly, what does this mean for India? So let me now share with you something else that I found which is shocking. We have not paid any attention to governance of our higher education institutions in India. The best example of that is my own alma mater, Delhi University. I would invite you to tell me how many members are there on the board, on the governing board of Delhi University. If you don't know the answer, and it's very unlikely that you do, you'll be shocked to know that it has 485 members. 485 members, the governing board of Delhi University. The entity that selects the vice chancellor is one. The entity that oversees the vice chancellor is this board of 485 people. And the entity which has the ability to dismiss the vice chancellor for non-performance is a third entity. So there is complete fracturing of the board of all the central universities because they all suffer from this issue. So the new legislation that the government is going to bring in parliament in this December, I'm told, has to fix this problem of governance of our central universities. There are 55 of them. 11 of their vice chancellors in the last 10 years have been either dismissed or charge sheeted. It's a massive failure of governance. You know, many of these individuals were well-meaning, but they failed anyway. And it is because governance broke down. So unless we fix governance of our IITs, IIMs, by the way, the IIM bill of 2017 took my work on alumni governance and has implemented it. So they are building alumni governance little piece by piece in the IIMs. But what I'm suggesting is that now this perspective has to be taken to central universities, the IITs, and all the state universities as well. Why should Mumbai University not be run by its alumni, who are some of the most distinguished individuals in the world? Why should Presidency College, which is a state university also like Mumbai University, not be run by its best known alumni who are running the world? Why can't they run the university? Why should the government of Bengal run it? And why should the government of India run Delhi University? It should be run by the cream of our educational system, which is the alumni of these very same institutions. So this is one thing that should be extremely important. Then let me come to the point that Professor Sahasrabudhe mentioned. And by the way, I would like to believe that in the points that I have made so far, I have addressed the concerns that Professor Gautam and Professor Thiruvasagam raised earlier. So let me now talk about how do you create excellence apart from governance, right? I would say getting governance right is 70% of creating excellence. I'm not joking. If you get that right, everything else falls into place because a good board will fix everything else, including getting a great leader. And they will also get you financing, and they'll also get you fast, efficient decision-making. All of that will happen. So I have evolved a 10-box framework consisting of 5 pairs of things that you have to get right. And by the way, this is not all of it is original. I have taken the standard 7-box strategy execution framework. I'm a strategist, so I teach this stuff. And I've added 3 more boxes. So what are those 10 boxes? Governance, most important. Governance and strategy, that is the first pair. Structure and systems, that is the second pair. Staffing and skilling, that is the third pair. Governance, culture and leadership is the fourth pair. And communication and innovation are the fifth pair. You have to get all 10 things right. The most important is governance. Second is culture, because you have to build a peer culture. Again, I don't have time right now because that will take about 5 minutes, which I don't have. I think I'm just about out of time, though Professor Fente said that I could take a few extra minutes, so I will. I'm happy to address the issue of culture in Q&A. Governance is most important, then comes culture, and then comes leadership, and then the other 7 factors. And I'm happy to tell you that, when I started to head institutions, there was no manual that anybody had written. I had seen the manual that Professor Henry Rosowski, who was my teacher, when he was the provost at Harvard, he wrote a manual called the University and Owners Manual. But if you were to read it, you would not really get a framework for how to run a university. So what I did when I was at IIM Ahmedabad is that I created such a framework. I've not published it, unfortunately, but it's the same 10-box framework. So what I did is that I used IIM Ahmedabad as an example of how all the 10 boxes were built up. Now, why is that interesting? I'll share this with our Indian colleagues here. The best documented educational institution in world history is IIM Ahmedabad. No other institution in the history of the world, no other university in the history of the world has been documented as well as IIM Ahmedabad. About 200 people have written about its founding. I have read every single paper and every single book that they have written, and I've distilled that in those 10 boxes. And I've shared basically how each one of those boxes can be built up, and also what are the blunders that you can avoid. By the way, IIM Ahmedabad committed some blunders as well. I'll be very open and honest because they have themselves acknowledged it. And by the way, it was the same blunder that Harvard Business School created, and it took them about 20 years to overcome it. That again, we can cover if you like in the Q&A, but I want to pause here because we certainly want to leave enough time for Q&A and for other speakers. So I just wanted to share that if we apply not formulaic thinking, but framework thinking, then I think we can get a lot of answers to our conundrums. So with that, Professor Fente, and back to you. And let me stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Professor Shailendra Raj Mehta. Thank you. That was most enlightening and so many important points to note to guide the vision and bringing home the importance of governance in higher education. I wish I could say more, but we need to go on. And now, last but not the least, I'm most eager to call Professor Ramesh Ganta, who will be speaking on the topic that he certainly has the authority to speak about based on his experiences and services that he has given in the field of education. But let me introduce our esteemed speaker. Born in a small, tiny tribal village near Bhadrachalam, Professor Ganta Ramesh obtained his doctoral degree in education from Osmania University at a very young age. He started his teaching career from Osmania University and moved to Banaras Hindu University at Varanasi. Inspired by the notion Janma Bhumi, he returned to his native state and served Kakatiya University, Warangal, in different capacities. Professor Ramesh Ganta was selected for Fulbright Fellowship in 1989. Subsequently, he availed himself UGC associateship and conducted advanced research in aesthetic education. Apart from being a recipient of University Best Teacher Award of Andhra and National Best Teacher Educator Award by IATE, Professor Ramesh has also received the UNESCO NLM Award 2010 and SAC Akshar Bharat National Literacy Award of Government of India, MHRD in 2012, as chairman of the Best State Resource Center for Adult and Continuing Education, Hyderabad. Professor Ramesh has been awarded Emeritus Fellow by the University Grants Commission in 2013. He was superannuated from Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad, a central university, in 2018. We are very honored to invite him to speak on participation, diversity, and pluralism in higher education. Professor Ramesh Ganta, over to you, please.
Thank you, madam.
Yes,
Good
sir.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Professor Tiruvasagam, President AIU, and my good friend, Professor Amarendra Pani from AIU, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, Professor Samsarao Garu, and the Coordinator, Professor Fonte of Department of Psychology, and high profile, very distinguished panelists. I'm the last person. One way, I'm rather lucky to be the last speaker. When Pani introduced the webinar, he made an observation that UNESCO asked India to contribute for developing a paper on university governance. This reminded me a Foundation Day lecture for NCT delivered by Dr. Karan Singh sometime back. He was also a member of UNESCO report on education, the learning the treasure within, wherein they identified 4 pillars of education. That is, learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. Interestingly, Karan Singh, being a member of the drafting committee of that report, stated that they are all new to the Western societies. The learning to know is Jnana Yoga. Learning to do is Karma Yoga. Learning to be is Purushottama. And learning to live together is Vasudaivaka Kutumbakam. That means most of the things what we talk about just now, my procedure also explained Nalanda, Takshashila, and other universities, how they contributed to the domain of higher education some thousands of years ago. That speaks volumes about the greatness of our Indian education system. But at the same time, we are really conscious of the limitations with which the present day system of education is operated, which is very clearly and a detailed manner, being the AU president professor has delineated. It's a very interesting thing because the first thing he observed that the appointment of vice chancellors, either in the state or central universities, way back in 2007, the then Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, has stated the way how the appointment of vice chancellors are taking place in this country. He was so upset with the procedures followed, and that was made available on the website of the UGC for a long time. And only the difference now we could see that both at the national level and the state level, the vice chancellor positions are notified. Nothing more than that has been happened. This is what I could say. But anyhow, I'm not going to discuss about all those things what the president of AIU has stated, and he is the right person who can intervene and interact with the education planners, the politicians, whoever may be responsible for bringing certain rather changes in the system of functioning the higher education. I hope it will happen. Otherwise, the NUP 2020 may not move forward unless certain radical changes have been brought into the governance. That is what our speakers have clearly stated. Now, coming to my topic, that is participation, diversity, and pluralism. See, diversity, when you look at Indian higher education, naturally, still there is a feeling that the higher education is now made only for a particular section of the society, that is elite. Maybe because the feeling, maybe to some extent it is correct, because the best universities that are there in this country are mostly accessible only to the few who can afford. That's why in higher education discussions, we always talk about accessibility, affordability, accountability, inclusiveness, then quality, and achieving the excellence. These are the terms very often we, being the part and parcel of higher education, talk about on different occasions. When we take about access, yes, no doubt, the country could expand the facilities for higher education, but unfortunately, we could not bridge the gap from one institution to the other institution. In the sense, we have the best or the topmost institutions like IITs, IIMs, then some other central institutes and central universities, coming to the state universities, deemed universities, private universities, and at the bottom level, our so-called schools of distance education. All these institutions are doing the same job of providing access to the students and also awarding the degrees. But can it be possible for anyone with any sense of academic consciousness can compare a product of an IIT or IIM or IISc with that of a student coming out of a school of distance education, which is at the bottom level? Because we all pretty know that these schools are working in the universities only to money making or fund generation machines, nothing more than that. We have to be frank enough to accept. So the first thing, when we talk about participation, this also to be viewed in a very scientific way, in the sense, even today, when we talk about the accessibility, even Sham Pitroda suggested that we need so many universities, provided if the country can afford to provide +2 education to all the children who are eligible to have it. No, not eligible, everybody should have it. It is almost a compulsory education for all in the present 21st century. Though long back the Gandhi has stated that compulsory primary education to all, now though the governments in principle accepted, but they are not making a open statement that +2 is made compulsory, but all our efforts are moving towards that +2 compulsory education. But unfortunately, even today, some crores of children who are supposed to be in the portals of +2 schools, they are outside the schools. Those who come and complete the +2 level, the access is not a major problem, because we have a variety of institutions. All our cry is to get a seat in a better institution. And that's why now our focus should be more on the providing +2 to all, up to +2 to all children, then think about expanding higher education according to the needs and requirements of all children. We can't deprive certain sections of the children coming to the higher education unless we rather correct our approach and ensure that every child, whether they are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, girls, minorities living in the top of the hills or in the plain areas, whoever they may be, it should become the mandate on part of the state or the national government to ensure that every child spends 12 years in the school. Then coming to higher education, then only we can talk about participation of the children coming from all sections of the society. As we are all aware that our society is a fragmented society, our society is a hierarchical society, our society is having so many geographical, cultural, economical variations. And when we want to talk of the participation of all the students from all sections of the society, first of all, we have to ensure +2. Followed by that, we have to minimize the gap that exists between the one university to the other university. Because now my distinguished speakers have made a mention about a good number of foreign universities which are on the top of the list among the world universities. Even in India, certain institutions are there comparable to that of the best in the world. But there are institutions which may not be considered to be the institutions except the degree vending machines. It should not happen. That should be our approach. So participation means our focus should be more on the deprived sections of the students. It is often observed that though we provide access to the children coming from the deprived sections of the society, more particularly the tribes and the scheduled castes and the girl students, once they join the higher education, because they come with poor school education background and there is no mechanism in terms of providing some compensatory education to such students who join higher education. And therefore, even in the recent report, it is observed that the students who join the premier institutions in the country, when you look at the dropouts, it is more among the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward students. So that is the responsibility of the higher education system to ensure that the proper compensatory education is to be given and proper guidance and counseling is to be provided. And we have to ensure not just by giving admission into an institution, our responsibility never ends, and the responsibility of the system will be complete only when they exit the institution to be on par with the others who come out of such institutions. Then only we can proudly say that the participation by virtue of creating accessibility to higher education is realized. Otherwise, it is not going to help in any way. That is also another important thing that we have to consider, the recruitment of the teachers, because the same report stated that the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and the OBC teachers are few in many of the national institutions who claim that they are the premier institutions. When you admit the students, not only it is the responsibility of the scheduled caste or ST teachers, but every teacher has to take care of the children coming from deprived sections and create or instill self-confidence among these students and ensure that they exit the institution with quality education. So that's why generally we ignore if a student is lagging behind as if it is his sin. That should not happen. There should be a total change in the frame of the teachers, whether they belong to this community or that community. It is their total responsibility to ensure that each and every student in the class will exit with the same quality or same degree of education. Otherwise, the teacher should own the responsibility and he can't just mold the students who are quite coming from an elite society with all facilities, and if they turn them out with a good communication, good knowledge base and all these things, that is not going to be the success parameter to assess the success of a teacher. A successful teacher is one, for him everybody sitting in front of the class, irrespective of their differences. We have to ensure, it may not be possible to make all as one, but at least the gap between among the student is to be minimized. So therefore, now the governance should focus on this particular issue of providing accessibility, not only accessibility, the quality education to all the children, particularly coming from the deprived sections. Otherwise, this gap will continue, which is not going to be the good for the health of the society. Particularly, the present context demand that we have to work out certain strategies of addressing these students. It's not just mere admission. How best we can compensate the educational gaps and we can bring them into the mainstream education system in a particular given institution. How best we can accommodate them with the environment of that institution. All these things are to be taken into consideration, and accordingly we have to take. Otherwise, this type of these just mere giving admission, and if they drop out of the system, it is a colossal waste of the national finances. The second thing is diversity. This is one thing, because when we look at higher education, though since last couple of years we are talking about decentralization, autonomy, or credit based and all these things, but still we could not break the regimentation that we inherited from the beginning. Unless we break that regimentation, because even the several statistics state that majority of the students are studying only the so-called basic courses which were there from the decades. Students are not willing to opt for new courses because the corresponding changes are not taking place in the job market. Because only when one wants to join, because particularly the children coming from the lower strata of the society, they always prefer some job in the government. That is one particular phobia which will dominate the choice of the students, and the government jobs are mostly restricted to the traditional regimented academic programs. And it's my experience, if somebody wants to be a teacher in a government school, if they study newly designed programs at undergraduate level, the government will say that you are not eligible unless you study maths, physics, chemistry, or biology, zoology, and chemistry, something like that. So therefore, these courses are to be made more flexible. Accordingly, the government jobs are to be made flexible. Otherwise, the students coming from the lower strata of the society may not prefer to opt for newly designed or new innovative programs which we are offering at the undergraduate level, either by the UGC or other apex bodies. This is one thing that we have to remember, particularly when we talk of diversity. And the regimentation is to be broken down, more particularly the academics, and the curriculum development should be more dynamic instead of static. The curriculum that we develop, naturally we talk about the core curriculum, we talk about the common curriculum, but prescribing the same curriculum to all is not a good idea. And a lot of autonomy is to be given to the people to develop their own curriculum, wherein they can address the local needs and also can take the students and their capabilities while transacting the curriculum. Particularly in India, there is a feeling that the curriculum speaks about the quality of education, which is a myth but not a reality. The curriculum nowadays, more particularly, we are adopting the curriculum of most of the foreign universities. That is not going to talk or prescribe the quality for our education. Curriculum is a basic requisite, no doubt, but quality is not just the offshoot of the curriculum that we prescribe. The quality can be made possible provided the curriculum that we suggest is effectively transacted, and the student, if they assimilate the same and apply the same to the situation or the context that is given, then only that speaks about the quality. But both at the school or the university level, they go on revise the curriculum by way of incorporating new subjects without looking at the students' ability to understand and the teacher's capability to transact. And there is a big gap that exists between the curriculum and the transactional strategies. So therefore, when we talk of diversity, no doubt we have to give total autonomy, and the local specific curriculum is to be developed. While doing so, the curriculum planner should keep in mind several factors which include the nature of the subject, the local conditions, and the students' abilities, and the resources available in the institution, and the requirements or the demands of the neighboring society, and all these things, including the local, global, and all other requirements. And accordingly, if we can develop the curriculum, that curriculum will definitely facilitate the students what we are expecting out of them in the process of nation building. But unfortunately, though we talk of multidisciplinary, we talk of credit-based, all these things are just there on paper. Why? Because since 1970 onwards, we are moving towards a faculty-wise universities. Earlier to that, we used to have the same composite universities or multi-faculty universities. 70 onwards, we have traveled a long distance by way of creating faculty-wise universities. For example, we have one Andhra Pradesh Agricultural University. When we were, since about 10-15 years back, the same university is divided into 4 universities: AP Agriculture University, AP Horticulture University, AP Veterinary University, and another one is AP Dairy Science University. So now the focus is towards a composite university or multi-faculty university. Could the governments will come forward to take a policy to get back all those departments or all those divided universities into one? With all these things, we have gone up to 800 to 900 universities. Now, if we talk of multidisciplinary universities, the options are two. That is, get back all such faculty-specific universities into one and amalgamate it as a composite faculty university, or otherwise create new faculties in the existing single faculty universities. It's a big challenge before the governments and academic planners. It's not any easy just to talk about the multidisciplinary university is going to create a congenial environment that will make the student to become an integral personality. All these things, okay, absolutely nobody can dispute because we are quite strong in our theory and there is no need even to look at others, because our philosophers, our educationists have given us a lot many theories which are even relevant in the present 21st century. If you look at Aurobindo, he has given an integral education where he clearly stated that education should reflect on the physical, vital, mental, spiritual, and psychical dimensions. Any education that is possible only by way of diversity and flexibility. Otherwise, that education with a mono or type of curriculum or mono activities, I don't think is possible. Only if the education address all these dimensions of an individual, then only one can expect an integral personality out of such students who pursue the education. So in that context, we have very good examples from our own great philosophers, our own great educational thinkers. But we have moved in a different direction, not understanding what our people have said. For example, Nalanda and Takshila, they are not subject specific. You see, way back some thousands of years back, they taught science, they taught arts, they taught mathematics and architecture, whatnot. So now instead of appreciating and accepting our own tradition and our own strength of universities, we have traveled a long distance in a different direction. And now we realize like going back to the basics. So therefore, it's a big challenge for the educational planners and more particularly the politicians, if they are interested to create such universities. You imagine what type of resources that we require in order to create, and at the same time, we should be in a position to rather discard such institutions which are not raising, because simply going on saying every year that so many colleges are there without lecturer, so many colleges are there without proper infrastructure, there are so many colleges just allowing mass copying. These things are not going to allow us to continue further, because we can't go on say all these things, and it's a time, or a high time rather I can say, coming out with a new education policy of 2020. All these things are to be corrected, and otherwise society is not going to accept if we take the shelter under such state that this is to be done, that is to be done, and going on saying for last 2 decades, 3 decades, same thing without bringing some radical changes in the system. I don't think it will continue to be like this only. So the diversity is not just simply adopting a particular system, it should percolate into the courses, into the programs, into the institutions, and a lot of freedom is to be given to the teachers, to the students to choose their own programs, and Accordingly, if we allow them, that is what our Rasa principle in Indian thought say about. See, education should allow the individual to express what they intend to express. This is what Gandhi has said. But unfortunately, what is happening? Students, though they are interested in some other course or some other subject, they are compelled to take something other than that because of market forces, because of family influence, because of lack of guidance, because of so many other reasons. If the system becomes open and if the society also accept this type of philosophy and the developments, naturally there will be a possibility of breaking the regimentation. Otherwise, if you expect some change in the system without expecting corresponding change in other systems, I don't think it will work effectively. So this diversification, because you see, after all, the United States or some other advanced countries, they are accepting not in isolation. If a student study a computer and he will go to photography, and then another credit will be in some philosophy or anthropology, but they are treated equally, and it is the choice of the student whether they are there in this field or that field. Absolutely, there is no distinction that is observed by the society. They are treated on par. But unfortunately, in our country, that is not acceptable unless if somebody is somebody come out of the medical school or a college of engineering or some other advanced sciences like biotechnology, this and that. If anybody will go for psychology or philosophy or sociology, they are treated differently. That should not happen. So therefore, the second important thing is the structural change, both in education, should also go with the corresponding systems, and accordingly diversity of subjects and programs and the courses are to be offered in order to satisfy the inclinations of the students, because by the time they join undergraduate course, they are grown up. And unfortunately, even in our country, we don't have the guidance and counseling either at school level or at the university level. The teacher should take the responsibility, and first of all, we have to identify their aptitude and attitude towards the program. Simply, we conduct the entrance examinations most of the time. What we do, we test the knowledge base of the student in the given subject. That's all. Whether really that student is interested in that subject, whether that student is having an aptitude to pursue the higher knowledge in that particular subject, we are not going to test in most of the cases. Here and there, some universities and best institutions in our country are moving in that direction, but it should be made mandatory for all universities. Unless otherwise, if somebody is not interested in that subject, if you admit them, we can't expect it will become a dead investment. It should not happen. And the pluralism, this is it is a step ahead of this diversified courses that we offer. Pluralism is at a time the student should be allowed to master more than one areas of knowledge. It is maybe one thrust area, maybe one thing. Simultaneously, they have to, because the whole purpose of education is to make a man a complete man. It is not the purpose of man is to make a man a robot. Because long back when Herbert Reed has written a very important book, that is Redemption of the Robot. The purpose of education is not to make a man a robot. The purpose of education is to make a man a complete man. Therefore, now the task ahead of the present day education is to redeem the man from the robotic characteristics. Therefore, we have to provide an opportunity and a channel for the student to express their innate energies in a different directions, so that they will become what they are. Otherwise, they become just simply going on studying computer without understanding what is next to the computer. It is not going to help either the individual or the society or the nation or the globe as a whole. It should not happen. So therefore, the plurality means one should maybe interested in one thrust area. Along with that, they should also identify the areas through which they can express their feelings. That's what exactly one of our learned speaker has suggested, that it is not just, that's what even AICT chairman is saying, that the engineering students just not confining to the laboratory and theory of studying either mechanical or electrical engineering. Besides that, they have to orient themselves with other disciplines of knowledge. When they go to industry, they should handle few hundreds of workers where they need some background of industrial psychology. And if they go to the society, produce the goods from their industry, they need some ethical orientation. In absence of that, probably they can't, they always think in terms of the profit loss and a balance sheet. That should not be. So like that, any student pursuing a particular program, instead of becoming a super specialist in that, he or she should learn some other subjects which will make them to be not only a technocrat, first to become any human being, or whether if he's a doctor, first he should or she should be a human being. So that is why there is an urgent need to integrate our curriculum, irrespective of the disciplinary background, our culture, our heritage, and our value system, which will develop a manly or a humanly characteristics, and they are the need of the hour. In absence of that, most of the social problems are identified with the educated people, but not with the uneducated. And education should not make them to be the troublemakers, but they should be the what we call the very important persons in the process of national development. So therefore, such changes are to be brought in, and most of these things were clearly delineated in the national education policy. But my doubt is, unless the governance is appropriately modified or recasted, at the same time institutions also to be restructured, and the mental frame of the teachers working in the universities are to be rather thoroughly overhauled in order to ensure that these things are made possible. Unless otherwise, we can't expect just because of stating in the policy is going to help us in realizing what we intend to realize out of it. Because the teachers, for example, if you check the teachers in higher education, they are not oriented, because across the world, the pedagogical sciences develop so much. Now, no two topics within the subject cannot be taught with the same method of teaching. The integration of technology. Today afternoon, many people talked about the COVID and the use of online teaching. But one interesting thing, even without orientation to online teaching, to majority of teachers, we could make use the online to the extent possible, but not to the optimum level. Therefore, our teachers, particularly working in the university system, they are going the strategy of transaction, what they adopted or what they experienced with their own teachers who taught them at the master's level. That should not be, because now the entire world is moving towards equipping the teachers with pedagogical science orientation and the knowledge, not through just these academic staff college or 3 weeks. That's not going to be sufficient, because nowadays we rely more upon, instead of equipping the minds of the students with information, as R.S. Peters has rightly said, that learn how to learn is more important than mere acquisition of knowledge. So all teachers working in the higher education institutions, instead of waiting somebody will come and invite us for orientation or refresher or some other program, they have to learn on their own, because everybody is accessible to the online resources, and they should equip. They may be the masters of, even in the recruitment, they look at the competency of the candidate in terms of their subject. That is okay, fine. That is already rather tested through the net and other eligibility tests. But we have to ensure whether that candidate can able to deliver the content effectively to the students to facilitate better learning among the students. That we are not testing. They may be good. They may be having dozens of publications. As the president of AIU said, that most of the vice chancellors are picked up because of number of publications, number of citations, number of so many things. That is one thing, no doubt about it. That is speaks volumes about their excellence. But That is not what is everything that is required to administer an institution. Like that, this candidate whom we select as a faculty in a university system, we have to see that not only the content knowledge is sufficient, unless they are thoroughly grounded in pedagogical science, particularly the type of students they are coming to the higher education institutions, and the content that we are supposed to transact in the context of multidisciplinary approach, they need altogether new orientation. This is what exactly the education planners are supposed to keep in mind, and accordingly they have to rather work out the action program to develop the required competencies among the university teachers. Automatically, at the same time, we have to see that whether they are committed. At this, we have to ensure at the time of recruitment, and then only we can expect the quality can be ensured. So when we simply talk of achieving excellence or achieving quality in higher education, will become only a slogan unless a systematic or systemic reforms are brought into higher education, and then only there is a possibility of elevating our institutions by way of minimizing the gap among the different type of institutions that exist in the higher education sector, and where we can, if not be on par with the best of the world universities, at least we should be in a position to provide the education what our student wants to have, because no student is happy with what that is going on in the institutions of higher learning. The teachers are happy, nor the parents are happy, nor the society is happy. And if you read any report, they are not happy with the quality. Quality cannot be ensured or attained just because of one intervention or two interventions. There should be a systemic approach to achieving the quality. That is what we expect as the end product of the higher education. So therefore, my observation is that the participation, we have to ensure that every student who is a child of this country should have the access to higher education. One should not be denied or deprived, maybe because of a variety of reasons. That should not happen. And the regimentation in higher education is to be dismantled. A lot of flexibility is to be given. While doing so, providing the flexibility, we have to ensure that work well, and it should reflect the students' interest, and it also reflect the interest of the discipline. It also reflect the interest of the society, because ultimately the education is for the society, because it is by the society. Therefore, we have to look at it. And at the same time, the higher education system, more particularly, should also conscious of the future demands and future challenges. This is what exactly Alvin Toffler has written in his Future Education. Most of the time, we plan just for 3 years, just for 5 years. By the time our student move out of the corridors of our higher education institutions, the society will travel 10 miles ahead of what we rather predict some 2 or 3 years back. It should not happen. So therefore, we have to have a systematic planning, keeping in view the predicted future and probable future, and accordingly the educational programs are to be designed. Therefore, by the time the student move out of the corridors of the higher education institution, they will adjust, accommodate, and get a proper job or whatever it is, a source of earning in that given society. Otherwise, simply by the time, if you think something today, by the time they come out of the institution after 5 years or 7 years, the society will, the technology or the society or the system will undergo change, and that change may not accommodate these products. It should not happen. Therefore, the education planners should have a futuristic perspective, and accordingly we have to plan the programs. And with all these observations, I think the expectations of NEP 2020 and what our Honorable Prime Minister has stated, that Achhe Shiksha can be made possible, because the higher education is the system which provide teachers both to the school and the university system. Unless we strengthen higher education, I think the school education can never come up to the level of the parental the expectations or the societal expectations. And at the same time, we may not provide quality teachers to the university system. So therefore, in order to justify and address the Prime Minister's expectations, the higher education should undergo a transformation. And I hope in the context of new educational policy, definitely some changes is expected, and definitely unless otherwise, policy will become like any other document. And only the advantage with this in this present context is that the Prime Minister, the President of India, his cabinet, and everyone concerned with politics, because all these years we used to say that politicians are coming in our way. Now politicians themselves have taken up the responsibility of implementing the NEP 2050 with all the targets fixed year-wise. Now we can expect the lot of support from the governments, and therefore it is a high time for the academicians in this country to rise to the occasion and formulate policies at the earliest, and ensure that this policy just by in principle, if we say that we are implementing, just implementing is not going to serve the purpose. If we bring the corresponding changes in curriculum, in the institutional structure, in the governance, everything, then only the fruits of this new policy can be enjoyed by the students, by the faculty, and by the society as a whole in the days to come. With these few words, I thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University for giving me this opportunity, and also it's an enriching experience for me to take part in this webinar, where I could listen to the stalwarts of different sectors of education, both management, technical, and other areas. Really, it's a very good evening for me, which has given high order knowledge about education and the governance of higher education. I thank personally to these learned speakers, and also I wish all the best to the participants. Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Fante, because since last 1.5 months she is calling me, and every time she is reminding me about this. Just I have given my own observations and experiences being in the field of higher education, more particularly in the teacher education domain for the last 30 years. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. It has been a very good evening for us also with you all. Thank you so much. That was heartfully delivered talk. Indeed, the world has much to learn from us, from our experiences, right? Now we must go on. I thought we were to have the discussions, the comments about the talks by the Secretary General of AIU, Dr. Mrs. Pankaj Mittal, as well as my consultant in this, our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Patnaik, J.K. Patnaik, but his, let me see whether he is back. His department is organizing an international webinar regarding the India, Bangladesh and Myanmar relations. He's a man of political science, and he has been called away to give the felicitation where ambassadors, former ambassadors were speaking. So I think we are going to need to miss that. However, sir is here. Okay.
Yeah, Madam, I'm here. Actually, because thank you very much for taking my name. Because you took my name, I have to say I'm present here.
I did not see that.
Yeah, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor, and the distinguished speakers. I had listened to the first couple of speakers. After that, I sneaked out and I joined in there in that seminar that which you referred to. What it seems to me is that the gist of the presentations of the distinguished speakers is that there is a need to have reforms at the systemic level and also at the system level, in the sense that the organizational structure, the leadership pattern, and the funding dynamics, all these things need to have revamping, and particularly in the context of the new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020. Actually, these things do figure prominently, though, when it comes to the brass tacks, when it comes to the nuts and bolts of implementing those things, it seems to me that there is a long way to go. Having said that, because this is a kind of consultative interaction meeting, my feeling is that we need to, prepare a very sound document projecting and the important points that are highlighted by the speakers. A very important point is that we need to underscore the regional variations, also the civilization variations when we present it to the UNESCO. This is very important because within the Indian context, inside the domestically Indian context, we have lots of variations, and for the reason of which the education system and the pattern of governance also do vary. And also, one of the speakers very pertinently pointed out that education figures in the concurrent list, and because of the so many states have their different variations, and there is no uniformity in the pattern of governance, which is also important. That also need to be highlighted in the report that you would like to just sum up, or whatever you need to sum it for the AIU, for the ultimate summation and submission to the UNESCO. And second point is that about the civilizational aspect, which was highlighted. I don't remember the name. Excuse me, pardon me for forgetting the name. He emphasized about the importance of Indian civilization and the values that we have. And in fact, another speaker, actually, I was present for the three speakers, also highlighted about the unsent, in the middle, of course, I left the seminar. Yes, Professor Mehta. Actually, given the kind of history of university system that we have had since the ancient times, at what stage we are now, and what is the reason for the decadence, that those things, that they are in the history books. The point is that how to revive those kind of, that old traditional things, and how it does figure in the, at the international level, in the world stage. That is very important. So these are the aspects, some of the important aspects I think we need to, emphasize, we need to highlight, and also incorporate in the report. I don't want to speak anything more than this. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Unmute.
Oh.
Madam, unmute, please.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're so proud of our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Patnaik. He has been with us for, I think, around 17 years here in Mizoram University. I thank him for his leadership. Academically, he's like from bachelor's, first class, first distinction, gold medalist, and PhD from Queen's University in Canada. We're very proud of him. He is published widely. He has produced so many PhD degrees under him as well. Thank you so much, sir. And now we will go on with summary because, the comments, we will also leave it to Dr. Pani, who is here also on behalf of the Secretary General, and who else is more apt to summarize the program today and give a vote of thanks to all the participants and our speakers than the very principal coordinator, he himself, of this series of webinars being held across 10 universities in the country. That's Dr. Amarendra Pani, with his capable team, including Dr. Usha et al. I saw them all joining us there. Dr. Amarendra Pani is the Joint Director and Director in charge of Research at AIU and has held many important positions and has been instrumental in the development of the AIU. He has master's and PhD degrees in the discipline of education. He has more than 25 years of experience in the field of higher education, educational policy research and academic administration, teacher training, and professional development. He has worked in many of the apex level agencies in education, like the NCERT, AIU, ICNU, and various academics as well as administrative positions in these institutions. He headed the meeting division of AIU, which convenes the meetings of vice chancellors at zonal and national level. And Dr. Pani has the distinct credit of designing and drafting the national guidelines of Anvishan, the National Student Research Convention organized by the Association of Indian Universities for identifying and training the young researchers in the country. He has lectured extensively in the area of globalization of higher education, teacher education, research methodology, and management of research in higher education institutions, research ecosystem, measurements and evaluations, and the like. He was one who represented the AIU often even abroad. So to summarize and give a vote of thanks, I am very honored to call Dr. Amarendra Pani, the Joint Director, Research, AIU.
Thank you so much, Professor Denny. In fact, it has been a marathon discourse, but trust me, we have not become tired because the points, the speakers, the deliberation was so splendid indeed that I have no words to express my gratefulness. Anyway, you have given me a very major responsibility, and which I am going to complete in 3 points. Number one, little bit about my ideas, my stake, and my observation about the higher education governance in the country, being sitting in a position of an organization which is engaged into the policy research and having little bit of experience in the higher education system and governance. So I have some points of my own. Second, I'll be talking little bit, rather giving a recapitulation about the committees and commissions and the policies that has been framed in the country and which has been governing the governance system of higher education. That will be the second point of my discourse. And third one, I will be giving a little bit of summary of all of my speakers, which is definitely all the speakers were so big and the ideas were so scintillating, and I can't give it a real picture of the summary and all those things, but I will try my level best. Number one, first of all, I put on record, I admire and I appreciate that this consultative meeting has not turned to become just another consultative meeting. Why I am saying so? Number one point, let me tell you, the major point, rather the crucial point. Every last few decades, we have seen that every deliberation, every discussion on higher education degenerates into criticism, vehemental criticism of our own system of education, which has not become here the matter of criticism. Rather, we have got so many good points, positive points, which I think they will support us in preparing and capturing the country report. First point is that. Second point is that all the speakers, they maintained very good time and they didn't digress from the area of a focus what they were requested to speak on. These are the two very good points, and that makes this consultative meeting a unique one in its own merit. Now, coming to the higher education governance, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's the higher education governance which is the panacea for all ills in higher education sector. All the issues in higher education, quality, quantity, curriculum, teacher training, recruitment, whatsoever, you name any issue in higher education, definitely it has got some kind of a connectivity with the higher education governance system. Means all the issues in higher education primarily stems from the quality of a governance system. And let me tell you, so far as the governance system is concerned, that in India, we have shown the way to the world. But today, on certain aspects, of course, we are lagging behind and we have the shortcomings, and therefore we are preparing through various policy documents how to respond to such kind of situations and counter the challenges presented before us by the contemporary times. Let me, just in the process, I think having a relook, having a recapitulation of the policy documents and some of the suggestions, recommendations of various committees, I think that warrants merit. Number one, first of all, if you look at the higher education governance system in the independence period, first of all, Radhakrishnan Commission, 1948, who favored a position of less interference from the government and a grant of greater autonomy to the universities. And it emphasized the importance of a legislative framework for universities to operate in a strong governing body with external members, thus leaving the universities free from external interference. Universities were supposed to be the self-regulating entities. They are expected to adhere to the standards set by the University Grants Commission as the model organization. This was the Radhakrishnan Commission. In fact, University Grants Commission was established with the recommendation of first recommendation was given by, of course, Radhakrishnan Commission. Then in AIU, Vice Chancellor annual general meeting also deliberation came. Government wanted to take AIU to perform the function of a UGC, but AIU during that time declined because AIU was supposed to be a think tank body for the government, enjoying a larger degree of autonomy. So that was the reason AIU also recommended that a separate organization for governing, controlling, and regulating the higher education should be established. That was established in the patent of London. In the second landmark, I can just give you a glimpse. It was the Kothari Commission, 1964-66. That also emphasized the introduction of innovations and ensuring accountability in the sector of higher education. And the Kothari Commission also highlighted the need to introduce autonomous colleges as the first step towards the introduction of innovations in higher education. According to the Kothari Commission, the sphere of autonomy lies in the selection of students, appointment and promotion of teachers, determination of courses of study, methods of teaching, selection of areas and problems, identifying the priority areas of research, and all those things. So even also, Kothari Commission re-emphasized the necessity of autonomy, and it is said that autonomy within a university, for example, autonomy within a department and within the college, and as the affiliating unit, and in the university sector, and beyond the university also, autonomy from the government, from the policy planners, from the regulatory architecture, all these things are important. And autonomy for a university in relation to its university system as a whole, that also needs to be looked at. And thereafter, I'm just running with the brief recapitulation of the committees and commissions, which I feel personally should be part of our country paper, that so far what kind of policy initiatives have been taken in bringing good governance to the higher education sector. The next landmark committee was the Dr. P.B. Gajendra Gadkar committee, and the report of the Gajendra Gadkar committee was governance of universities and colleges. And the Gajendra Gadkar committee was totally devoted for relooking, examining the governance structure of the universities and suggest the remedial measures. And after Gajendra Gadkar committee also, in 1990, Ganam committee was also appointed, and Ganam committee reviewed the existing management and structure in the Indian education system and suggested alternative models of management. And some of the recommendations, major recommendations were that the central government should make a legislation mandating its incorporation in the acts of all universities to follow and adhere to the regulations issued by UGC from time to time. This was the first recommendation. And the second recommendation was no new university should be established without the prior concurrence of the University Grants Commission and with reference to the special needs, size of population, and size of an existing university. New legislations for state universities should be referred to the UGC prior to their enactment. Following the Ganam committee, there was Central Advisory Board of Education, and that also constituted a committee which was headed by Sri Kanti Biswas, and Kanti Biswas also submitted its report in 2005, and the major recommendations were that all universities and colleges should be given the autonomy to start self-financing courses, particularly in new and emerging areas where job opportunities do exist. Then the second was all universities should shift towards the adoption of a choice-based credit courses along with the semester system. This was the recommendation which we implemented much later. And the third one was there should be switching over to complete the internal evaluation of students over a period of time with individual teachers. There were many, at least 10, 15 major recommendations of Kanti Biswas committee. And many of them, I think, are half implemented or not yet implemented. Then the next landmark commission was the National Knowledge Commission, who extensively spoke on university management and governance. And it said that the expansion of the system of higher education in India is not possible without enhanced level of financing. See, let me now cut short the story because people are tired, in fact. So after Knowledge Commission, even Jaspal committee also had submitted its recommendation on rejuvenating the higher education and its governance and system and everything. But as a matter of fact, let me tell you, after many years of the things also, we have been a bit slow in implementing the things. Probably that is one of the most important aspect, which has most rather dangerous and riskiest aspect, this implementation aspect, which has stood as a stumbling block for the quality and management of higher education system in the of our country. And the issues, as pointed out by our this eminent speakers, first of all, one point has been sporadically referred, which is very dear to me. That is doing away with the getting rid of the affiliating system. Affiliating system is really a curse which we have been carrying forward from our colonial legacy, and that system has affected the quality of higher education and governance system of the country. And it has been pointed out by all the eminent speakers and all, I think, in eminent academicians, and it has been deliberated in various forms, and everybody almost agrees that the affiliating system must be done away with. Second, regulation. Indian higher education system has always been subjected to intensive criticism. That is, the higher education system is over-regulated, less governed, and very, very haphazardly managed. So therefore, there is an urgent calling, even through the new education policy. Before that, there is an urgent calling that the regulatory architecture of the country needs a revamping and needs to be re-looked at, so that the system can be a good system of regulation, monitoring, and in the place of a regulation, a facilitation, very aptly said by Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe sir, and that has to be done. Then autonomy. Of course, autonomy has become a conundrum in our country. I do not know, even the almost less or more approximately same condition may be some other countries, but in our countries, basically autonomy, as we understand, academic, administrative, financial autonomy. Let me give you one glaring example of how autonomy is transgressed and how it is creating trouble for the universities and the apex leaders of higher education. One of the most glaring example is in one of the zonal meeting. It was probably the West Zone meeting, was happening in Barkatullah University of Bhopal, where Professor Ravindra Jain, the then Vice Chancellor of Barkatullah University, he pointed it out to one very important point. That is, he said that I am the Vice Chancellor of the university, I am the apex leader and decision-making authority, and I am supported by the Executive Council, Academic Council, and there are other bodies also. But my registrar and my finance officer, both are appointed by the state government. If they create any trouble, both, if they have some unholy allowance between the finance officer and the registrar, then I am defunct. I become paralytic because they do not allow me to function. They will be putting me in trouble. They don't listen to my command. So duality of a command. People are tired. Let me just running hurriedly because I have to present this summary also a little bit. So duality of command. This is creating a problem. And autonomy. Here, I have a very interesting experience, rather my observations. Since time immemorial, the educational institutions have been functioning. And the last 3 to 4 decades, we have been, maybe 3 decades maximum. The discussion, there has been an uproar, and then some momentum has, and this the issue of autonomy that has gained currency in the academic circle. My question is why? Since time immemorial, educational institutions are running, there was never any hue and cry for autonomy. Why did it happen? And the basic root of the autonomy and can be traced back to the early 19th century, when the Christian missionaries supporting the educational institutions, they started influencing the vice chancellors or colleges or the apex academic leaders to incorporate some religious component into the curriculum, and other kind of influences were there because they were the financiers, they were the funders. So therefore, the institution's autonomy was jeopardized. Otherwise, the institutions cannot survive because without their funding. So that was the first moot point from the issue of autonomy started, and now I think it has been a perennial issue in higher education, and it has become a continuous flux rather. And today, so far as the autonomy is concerned, it is linked with another responsibility that is called accountability. Because in higher education system, perhaps, we did not become answerable, we did not become accountable, we did not become responsible enough to show our accountability. Therefore, some kind of impeachment to our autonomy happened. I think we must take care of this aspect. Of course, leadership is an issue in higher education governance, and many of the issues in higher education sector, as I said, stems from the governance. Those same issues, they also stem from the leadership positions. Today, much has been said about the recruitment of the faculties, the picking of the vice chancellors, very aptly pointed out by Professor G. Thiruvasagam, our honorable president. All these things are happening, and we are also talking. But on ground, no visible action is being seen how to get rid of such kind of issues. And then financing, of course, financing is one of the the most important pillar around which the entire system is revolving. So therefore, financing, it has its own area, it needs a separate deliberation and discussion. And let me inform this August House that the theme on financing of higher education has been assigned to National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration. Somewhere in the third week of November, the financing consultative meeting is also unveiled, and that will be discussed there. Then, of course, significant point, let me tell you, this is transparency. I will tell you some of the apex bodies also, they are not uploading their this executive council meetings or the meetings of the apex body minutes in their website. Why? What kind of system we are following? Why we are not uploading them? Because we have done something wrong which we do not want to go to the public forum, right? Let's be honest, let's be sincere in our approach, let's maintain a certain degree of professionalism. So transparency is required. Let me tell you about my own experience of so many people, because you are moving around the university. So far as the recruitment is concerned, most of the universities are leaving the place for professors, readers. They are not recruiting people. Either they are recruiting with political interference, and this has been very aptly said, pointed out by many of the senior academics and policy planners also. While coming to the actual position, the recruitment doesn't happen on the basis of merit. It happens on the basis of some unholy allowance, political networking. Something somewhere is happening. We need to, I think, have some commitment to stick to the quality parameters, and to get rid of such kind of manipulations. It is required. So transparency, and of course, education is in concurrent list. There is a shared responsibility of the federal government.
इसको पूछो, हमारा minutes of the meeting website में कहाँ है? आपको मालूम है?
वेबसाइट में तो नहीं, हमारे मेल पर आता है.
नहीं, आप पूछो, जल्दी पूछो. EC काउंसिल कहाँ है? इसको पूछो, हमारा तरुण को पूछो ना, तो इसको पूछो.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And then after this, education is in concurrent list. Of course, there is a shared responsibility of federal and state governments. And this is also, this point is somehow linked with the diversity and the participation in higher education, increasing the access. And so far as the increasing access is concerned, very recently, I think Sastra Pradesh sir was also there in that webinar, we conducted one conference on eligible enrollment ratio. Of course, this looks very sound that all the population should be brought under the umbrella of higher education. I do agree. But in our country, a large number of population of that 18 to 23 age group, they are not eligible to go to higher education. And our GER, what we are calculating, gross enrollment ratio, I think probably it is flawed, it is faulty, because we are computing, taking the entire 18 to 23 years population into the ambit, and I think it is flawed, because a large number of the 18 to 23 age group population has not completed, has not gone up to the even 10th, and they are not eligible to get into the portal of higher education. So in the place of GER, the EER, eligible enrollment ratio, should be looked into, and that should be practiced. We must explore the possibility of using that. What I say, to conclude my own point, that the governance structure, governance system at macro level, of course, macro level, I mean at the level of the federal government, central government, the major policy making organizations, and that is at the macro level, that has to be set right first. Then the second one is meso level, middle level, state level. Third is micro level. Micro level, I refer to the level of institutions. So governance system at all these levels has to be set right. Then only we can achieve the result we are expecting. Having said so, now let me take over my responsibility, whatever Professor Dini has assigned to me, that is summarizing the talk of all the eminent speakers, which is a daunting and Herculean task for me, of course, because the big speakers, eminent speakers, they have given so much of ideas. Let me start with, first of all, Professor G. Thiruvasagam, Honorable President of AIU, and presidents are first focused that the organization structure, selection of authorities is the most important in the parlance of governance. And he also pointed out that selection and nomination of members to statutory bodies like academic councils, executive councils are not being done properly. And if we do not get good, competent, knowledgeable people with integrity to such kind of boards like executive council and the academic council and other bodies, those who are responsible for the governance of the higher education system, it will remain just as a slogan, and we are not going to achieve the target. And the leadership, of course, vice chancellors, the eligibility conditions and how they are getting selected, it was also deliberated by Professor Thiruvasagam, Honorable President Sir. And funding, Professor Thiruvasagam Sir also emphasized that funding is extremely important, and without adequate funding, no organization can be successful in its administration and governance. And the discrimination between the private and public universities, so far as the funding is concerned, needs to be done away with, and that discrimination should be removed. And the private universities also, those who are doing well, performing universities, they should also be funded. Sir, these ideas are well taken. I think some kind of policy recommendation has been already made in the new education policy document of 2020. So some kind of positive result we are going to experience in the future to come. So this was the talk of Professor Thiruvasagam. And then the second eminent speaker in the program schedule was Professor Binasil Gautam. Professor Gautam sir's point mainly, where he started the shifting from education to learning. The concept, the idea is that we must recognize there has been a paradigm shift from concept of education to learning from the 15th or 16th century. Then the universities, as per Professor Binasil Gautam, universities are places of literary pursuits, of course, intellectual pursuits, and push the border or the frontiers of knowledge. And what will be the next stage of higher education and learning? That UNESCO is now taking an attempt to collect the ideas and to collect the models practiced by different countries in the world, so that the future higher education model governance system can be decided. And so many good points given by Professor Vinaysil Gautam sir, and he categorized it in three things: structure, process, and methods. Of course, divergence of structure and is important, and process being bring the structure of life. Process brings to life these structures, and it do not operate. What is being seen now? Most of the things are being seen on paper, and they represented only in paper and nothing on the ground. And the malleability of the structure and flexibility and the barricading structure of higher education, all these points have been emphasized by Professor Vinaysil Gautam. And in the context of sustainable development goals in the 16th century, how the paradigm was shifted towards inclusiveness, quality, and equity. Then in the 17th century, again it was changed to peace, justice, and the principles and practices to be applicability at a global level. Professor Vinaysil Gautam emphasized that whatever the principles or practices we do, it must have global applicability, because today the boundaries are blurred, and the entire world has become only one. And he also emphasized that discipline and is also important in bringing the things to work, and so many other scintillating points, Professor Vinaysil Gautam sir. All your points was really interesting, impressive, and I would request Professor Dini to include all those points in our country paper. So our next speaker was Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe sir, of course, an astute administrator and a seasoned academician with a vast experience in educational administration, technical education management, and so many things. Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe spoke on system level governance, and he started his deliberation quoting Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi sir regarding the minimum government and the maximum governance. Of course, sir, even I like this punch: minimum government, and maximum governance is required. And the governance, Professor Sahasrabudhe said, should be citizen friendly, and single window system should be there, and it should be robust, and transparency should be there. And Professor Sahasrabudhe had a distinct point that the governance first should be good in all sectors. That is railway, air travel, industry, in all public private sector. Like before that, the governance system of higher education needs to be given priority. Reason being that it's the higher education that is the engine of the economic development. It's the higher education that identifies, nurtures, and prepares the leaders for industry, for this aviation industry, or for railway, for any kind of industry, economy, education, for all sectors. It's the higher education. They send the leaders, they prepare the leaders for future. So therefore, the higher education governance becomes the core issue, and first it must be given priority. Then all the stakeholders should, if the governance system, one of the beautiful sentence pronounced by Professor Sahasrabudhe, that if the governance system is sound and good, the stakeholders will never have any complaint or grievance. Of course, this is a very, very valid point. If our system at place is effective, is efficient, and addresses the needs of the entire the community or the stakeholders, then of course we will have less grievances. And Professor Sahasrabudhe sir also explained various reforms initiated by AICT, like examination reform, curriculum revision, internship program. Sir, in the context of internship program, I am in fact tempted to share one small idea. There are 9 components of a profession. At least 9 criteria are there. Then only one subject or something that can enter into the club of profession. And out of which this internship, like professional ethics is one of the component. Professional repository for knowledge that supports, which is evolved through continuous research and development activities. Like amongst the 9 criteria, one of the most important criteria is internship, that the education of a certain duration must be also extended with a period of internship. What happens in medical science after having 4 years graduation or this medical course at MBBS level, the candidates, they are subjected to some, I think 6 months or 1 year of internship. And so this is stated by Professor Srivudde sir, and this was a very appreciated point. And one nation, one data, sir, it is very important. Otherwise, it is creating problem for a particular things. A variety of agencies, they ask for the data, so we need one nation, one data. A very good point, sir. And multiplicity requirement of our data can be removed if we do this one nation or one data system. Virtual inspection and everything will be virtual. So far, sir, you informed, and it's of course good. And we have left with no option. We are left with no option because of this pandemic. Thanks God, almost it is getting reduced day by day, the kind of impression we are getting. But if it would have continued for another 1-2 years or more, so definitely all our activities would have been shifted to this online education, and that is true. And answerability, accountability, sir, you focused. It's very important. Conflict of interest should not be that. Sir, many of your points you have been discussing in many committees. I fully agree. I see people. One point, Professor Sahasrabudhe one day gave.
So you mentioned that minutes of the meeting, even regulatory bodies do not upload. I am showing you all minutes of the past 10 years are also here on the platform.
Thank you so much. I didn't say regulatory bodies. I said some apex bodies. I will tell you,
we are one of the apex body.
So nice of you, sir. I have a great sense of administration. I know you have put it, but there are some organizations where the minutes are not uploaded, and the minutes uploaded have been withdrawn, sir. I have the evidence to say that. So therefore I told, and it should not happen. And I scrupulously and very honestly follow your words in this direction. And especially one of your words, very scrupulously I follow, that the Executive Council members, they're coming for 1 or 2 hours of meeting, getting their sitting charts, but they do not contribute substantially to the system. Even they, at a time, they do not have the idea what they are going to deliver it. This is a very valid point. How
no,
can
sorry, Dr. Pani, please don't go that level of criticizing people. It is not good for criticizing. No, it is better now you restrict yourself. Don't go for that kind of things. No,
sir, what I'm saying, I'm concluding.
It is not good because in this platform, it is not good to criticize people. My feeling is that don't criticize
sir,
like that.
Sir, these are just shortcomings. I'm telling you, we need to do that. For transparency purpose, we need to do that. That is what, sir, I tell. Otherwise, I don't criticize, sir. Because at the beginning, I told that I will not criticize. And then all these points were very much important, sir, and well taken. And then Professor Shailendra Raj Mehta spoke on framework, in the framework and contextualizing the university governance and issues of governance, challenges of governance, and taking us back the ancient roots of higher education system in the country, starting from Takshila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, and all other things. And you have given us taken us a good tour for reminding us our education legacy, and many important points have been discussed by Professor Shailendra Mehta, giving us some innovative idea to improve the governance system in the higher education. And the last speaker of the schedule was Professor Ramesh Ganta, who spoke on participation, diversity and pluralism, and participation. Of course, there is a great need to increase the enrollment in higher education and to provide access to the people, those who have been deprived for a long time, and to bring all the people from all strata of the society to the portals of higher education. That was emphasized. Then the curriculum, one sentence that the curriculum speaks about the quality of the course, which is a myth. Yes, sir, we do agree, because if the curriculum quality is very good, but if it is not transacted in a good manner, then it creates problem. So likewise, there were so many good points of Professor Ganta also, because I know we are running shortage of time. I would like to conclude here with the last discussion of Professor J.K. Patnaik sir, who had a brief but very catchy and impressive points to put forth. Thank you so much, sir. And with this, without taking more time, ladies and gentlemen, I belong to a Vedic system. Therefore, always with a Vedic shloka, Vedic Himan, I complete my speech. And let me now recite it. Nalini dalagata jalamapi taralam. Nalini dalagata jalamapi taralam. Tavata janamati atisaya chapalam. Nalini dalagata jalamapi taralam. Tavata janamati atisaya chapalam. Shanamapi sangati sajan reka bhavati bhavanave tarana nauka. It means a drop of water is on the lotus leaf, and the lotus leaf is floating on a water body. The life of that water bubble, drop of water, is so fragile, so volatile. At any given point of time, it may drop into the water and the life ends there. Likewise, human mind and human thinking is also vulnerable, so volatile and fragile. Under this situation, if we get the camaraderie of some eminent people, knowledgeable people, and we get their companion, it will help us to cross over the ocean of knowledge, and it will just help us like a boat to cross over the knowledge of ocean. With these words and with this summary, I would like to conclude my summarization here, and I extend thanks to Professor Sambasiv Rao Saab for accepting our request and organizing, preparing the team to execute this event in a very meticulous way. And I am personally grateful to Professor J.K. Patnaik sir for patronizing, for supporting, for directing the team that has done commendable job. Of course, the team of Mizoram University under the leadership of Dr. H.K. Lalpuidin deserves accolade and appreciation. They have really done a splendid job. Thank you, Professor Deni and her team. And my team at AIU, also Dr. Usha, and they deserve accolade because they have been supportive to see that event goes well. And the most important, all our speakers, eminent speakers, very impressive points, quite you can say spellbound deliberation by our speakers, sir, and all your ideas, points transfer in this deliberation is certainly going to help us to prepare the country report in a enriched way. So thank you all our speakers, especially Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe sir, for taking out sparing some time from your busy schedule, and then Professor Vinaysil Gautam sir, and thank you so much for acceding our request and being a part of this August gathering. And of course, Shalendra Raj Mehta sahab, you also, we are grateful to you for giving your time to this conference, and I think your ideas will help us to capture the country report in a nice way. And with all those, and Professor Ganta sir, of course, he has spoken at length with the topic he was assigned with, and it was nicely deliberated. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. And at last, if I'm forgetting anybody, leaving any name, I would like to thank to all of them in absentia, or directly or indirectly, those who have been instrumental in making this program a grand success. Thank you very much. God bless. Jai Hind and Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. And in conclusion, I must inform the gathering here, the speakers, as well as the participants, that India's vision paper will, with respect to the future of higher education governance will be written based on the talks and the suggestions and the questions even that were not addressed. And thank you so much, Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe, for having answered the Q&A. And Professor and Dr. Pani for having touched upon one topic that was missing, that was institutional autonomy, organizational effectiveness, and accountability, which is also a part of the topic that has been given to us to write for the country paper. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. And of course,
Thank you for organizing this. Yes.
Sir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.